Cole pokes the rebound down around Ryan O'Reilly. Back of the net, right in front to score! Elias Lindholm wins it after a minute 2 of overtime. And the Canucks take a 3-1 series lead over Nashville.
And there you go. The Predators are in deep, deep, deep trouble. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios here. It is a Reaction Monday. Here's what we're going to do, just so everybody understands up front. 2 o'clock, Predators. 3 o'clock, Draft. 4 o'clock, Predators. 5 o'clock, Draft. Anybody got a problem with that? I thought so. Okay, so I want to start with this, which was last night's game, which was an absolute killer. This series is all but over. You're down 3-1, going back to Vancouver after what was, I guess in my opinion, the most disappointing playoff loss in the history of the Nashville Predators. And this may end up being the most disappointing playoff series in the history of the Nashville Predators. And it was all encapsulated by 3 minutes last night at the end of the game. In fact, I turned to my dad. I felt so good yesterday. We had a great show at 1 o'clock. We had a great time doing the show. Then we had a great time before the game. Then we had a great time at the game. I got a great parking spot for the game. I turned to my dad, who almost never wants to go, but, it's the playoffs. I turned to my dad, and I said, hey, they're going to pull the goalie here. When they pull the goalie, if the Predators put it in to make it 4-1, as soon as that puck hits the back of the net, turn it up the aisle because we're donezo. We're out of here. We're going to get on the road. We're going to get on our way. And I saw the goalie pulled, and I thought, okay, here's our chance, thinking, okay, and I'm going to get up the aisle and then get to the door and then and then all of a sudden I saw Vancouver with the relentless attack, and then I see the puck go in the net, and I see Vancouver get excited, and I'm like, okay, all right. It's okay. It's all right. These things happen. It's odd how often the other team scores 6-on-5 on the Predators and how often the Predators don't score 6-on-5 and get empty netted by the other team, but that's a different discussion for a different day. Then the Predators win some draws, and the Predators are out there, not great puck movement by Vancouver at the beginning, and the Predators end up, and then Colton Sissons hits the post. And when Colton Sissons hit the post, I thought, oh, God, here we go. Oh, no. And I kept looking up at the scoreboard and looking down the whole time with about 30 seconds to go, and I'm just holding on to my tush thinking, it wasn't a matter of whether or not Vancouver was going to score. It was a matter as to whether or not they were going to score within the 30 seconds or however long they were down in the Predator zone. It was, could they get it in before the horn went off? That was the only question. They were going to score. With those guys out on the ice and the guys you put out on the ice, which is an issue I have with the coach, because I did not like the units that he put out there at the end of the game with the empty net. But when Gus Nyquist fell down, I thought, oh, crap, this is trouble. And then, of course, they make the initial save. Yossi blows up the play trying in order to block the shot, ends up taking himself out of the play, which then allows everybody all the room in the world. So Besser's not challenged to get his own rebound, and he puts it back in. And when that puck went in the net and I saw them start to celebrate, and I looked up and I saw 6.2 seconds on the clock, I said, this series is over. That was exactly how I felt. And I was hoping, there was a little hope inside of me, that this team would have the scrotum to be able to overcome what was the incredible letdown that they had last night. 15 minutes of, hey, it's okay. Yeah, we screwed up, but let's get out there in overtime. Let's let one of these guys goes out there and makes a play. One of the big boys, one of the $8 million guys, one of the big-time guys. I'm not looking at Beauvillier saying, hey, Beauvillier, go win me the game. I'm looking at Forsberg and Yossi and not 20 seconds into overtime, it felt like that thing was over. I mean, just an all-time killer. And here's the most disappointing part of not just last night's game, but this series as a whole. you should have won this series. You're going to lose this series. I mean, it's possible they win tomorrow night. I don't think it's possible that they can win 3 games in a row. I just don't think they have good enough players to be able to do it. Anything's possible in the NHL, but, I mean, you're going to lose this series. And it sucks because you should have won this series. They have been playing with a backup goalie and now a third-string goalie for pretty much the entire series. And the one game that they didn't play with a backup goalie or a third-string goalie, you should have won. You should have won game 1. Probably should have lost game 2. Should have won game 3. And you absolutely should have won last night, and there is no question about it. And I know that we didn't go into the season thinking the Predators were cup contenders, and this will be a narrative that comes up if they lose tomorrow night or Friday or whenever. But this is the narrative that will come up, which is, well, they weren't supposed to be here, and they had a good season, and they're trying to build for the future, and that's great. And I can listen to that, at some point down the road when the Predators win the cup in 3 years or something like that. Then we can have this discussion. But right now, all I can do is live in the moment. And in the moment, I am looking at a playoff series that the Nashville Predators should be up 3-1 in, maybe should have already won. That regardless, the Predators should have won this series, given the fact that they have, as far as 5-on-5 is concerned, they have completely outplayed Vancouver, and Vancouver, again, has been playing with a backup goalie and now a third-string goalie. And yet, tomorrow night, around 11:30, 12 o'clock, you're probably going to lose. And it sucks. Fan base deserves better. I would argue the team deserves better, but quite frankly, I think this is a problem with the team. And it is not lost on me that a week before the playoffs, Barry Trotz came on the show. This was before they played Winnipeg, where they got the point in overtime in order to clinch a playoff spot. And Barry Trotz, okay, we were already talking playoffs because, again, you're 1 point out with like 6 games to go, so you know you're going to get it. And so, we're talking about it with Barry. And I had talked about the fans. Barry, go the Bridgestone Arena, the crowd tonight, the fans, blah, blah, blah. And Barry basically said, fans, don't get on our guys. And I'm paraphrasing what he said. But he said, fans, there's a lot of anxiety in the playoffs, and, nobody wants to perform better for you guys than they do, and they're trying their hardest, and don't, let's do this together. Let's not get on the guys if things don't go well. And I was kind of sitting there thinking to myself, I'm going to let this go. But, I mean, come on now. We want to win. We don't want to almost win. And I wonder if Barry Trotz said that, because Barry Trotz, and I'm not speaking for him, I'm just wondering if Barry Trotz thinks this team's soft. If that when the Predators started the playoffs, Andrew Burnett, this team has nothing to lose. We weren't supposed to be here. They've got the Canadian media. I wonder if that is I know my team is soft. And because I know my team is soft, I do not want to put any pressure on them because they will crumble under pressure. And last night, they absolutely, completely crumbled. And it feels like this has been an issue for the entire series. Now, there are some dudes that seem to be completely immune to this just, wow, the moment is too big for me, like Jason Zucker and, shockingly, Anthony Beauvillier. Those two guys, the moment has not been too big for them. But for Yossi, for Forsberg, for McDonough at times, though McDonough was very, very good in game 2, Carrier and Lazan, Cole Smith, and then, quite frankly, Novak, Sissons with the post last night. It's like these guys are afraid to win. That's what it feels like to me. That this team, for some reason, that this moment is too big for them. And I don't know how it can be too big for a group of guys that have played in the playoffs as much as these guys have played. Ryan O'Reilly's won the Conn Smythe. Roman Yossi's played in 85 playoff games entering this playoff series. That's an entire season worth of playoff games. Saros has been in. I hate to sit here and tell you it's over because hockey is absolutely a fakakta sport, and nothing that happens, and I believe this for every other series, team, game, etc., and this is kind of an idiom that I now have when it comes to the NHL playoffs. Because if this were 5 years ago, I'd sit here and say, absolutely no way that they're going to win tomorrow. I'm not completely ruling it out. I don't think they're going to win tomorrow, but I'm not completely ruling it out because in hockey, each game is independent of the previous game. So the absolute vomit bag that was the end of last night really shouldn't have an effect tomorrow night because the NHL is just different. Basketball, you'd be laying down tomorrow night. Cancun on 3. But this ain't basketball. But I just don't know if this team has the stones to be able to win. I just don't know if they can do it. If they have the it factor in them to win. And the only reason I say it is because they've blown this series. This is a series they should have won. In 2015, you blew a series against Chicago. They went on to win the Cup that year. But you blew that series with a bunch of young guys, an inexperienced playoff team. That I got. First-year head coach. But this Vancouver team, no disrespect to Besser and Pettersson, who, by the way, has been a non-factor. We talk about the moment being too big for him. JT Miller. That's not Taves and Kane, who you blew the series to in 2015. And this is the only thing that I can compare this to. This is bad. I mean, there is just no way around it. And today and for the next week, I'm putting an embargo on this for an entire week because I think there's a pretty good chance they're going to lose on Tuesday. So I'm putting an embargo on this for an entire week. The talk of they weren't supposed to be here is not allowed. Because they should have won game 1, they should have won game 3, and there's no argument that they should have won game 4, and they have nobody to blame but themselves. And that's just reality. And it hurts. It hurts knowing that this team had the season they had, knowing that this team is capable of winning this series, and knowing that with the goalie issues and the way the games have unfolded, you should win this series, and you're not going to. That sucks. It sucks 1,000 times more than that Colorado series 2 years ago when you were outmatched from the first second of the first game. That one was, hey, we're getting embarrassed. It is what it is. This team's going to lose maybe before the start of May, and they should have won this series. Now, can they beat Edmonton? I doubt it. But again, I don't care about that. I'm worried about this series. And you absolutely should have won this series. And you're not going to. And that's the hard part. At least it feels like you're not going to. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Defeat snatched from the jaws of victory. Unbelievable last night. We'll get your reaction to the game. And then here's the reality that if I was Barry Trotz, I wouldn't have to publicly commit to this. I wouldn't even privately have to commit to this. But it would be where my head is at. You know, talk radio is, in my opinion, sports talk radio, it's like a daily report card, right? It's like, okay, here's where we are today. Here's what I'm thinking today. And there's something that, again, if I was the GM, I wouldn't be committed to right now, but I'd be getting there. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, and of course your phones today, 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game.
Fed to the side of the right circle. Back out for Hughes. Hughes for Miller. His shot to the side of the net. Shoveled over. And Saros tried to get there in time but could not. So with the extra attacker, the Canucks cut the Predators' lead to 1 goal. Yossi tried to clear it. Quinn Hughes keeps it in. Drops it back. Here is a shot stopped and a rebound try. Besser scores. Brock Besser picked up the rebound and has tied the game with 6.2 seconds left. 2 extra attacker goals here by the Canucks. And a hat trick for Brock Besser.
The first one's kind of backdoor right. He got a kind of empty net, and then second one there wasn't, I don't know, was 6 seconds left maybe. From my standpoint, I saw Miller coming down, and I just tried to go full block mode and not let him get it to net. I think it hits my stick and then off Juice pad, and I don't know. I would have to look at it. There's probably things that we can correct and do better. But yeah, it's too quick now to really assess what happened.
That was Yossi last night, and I got to say, a complete and total meltdown. And again, like he's going, well, I tried to go full block mode, and I took myself out of the play. Just like Gus Nyquist took himself out of the play, on the front end. I forget who it was. I want to say it was Pettersson he was chasing after, and he slipped up, and all of a sudden now it's 6-on-4. Yossi tries to block the shot. Now it's 6-on-3, and you lose. And again, talk radio is so different from everything else, especially sports radio. Take out, news talk and Rush Limbaugh and all that kind of stuff. But sports talk radio, to me, this is a daily discussion, right? We have the same discussions on the program that we assume the general manager and the coach and the assistant coaches and the assistants and that everybody's having all at one time. And then we decide what we think they should do. And then whether or not they do it, that's their business. But a lot of times these guys probably have a lot of these discussions in private that don't make it to public. And a lot of times these guys probably sit up there in their box, like Barry Trotz yesterday, who I looked at yesterday when Sissons hit the post. And Barry had to walk away from the box walk away from the edge of the box for a second. I cannot imagine how he reacted to that, internally. But there's probably a lot that's going on inside that head of his. And if I was Barry Trotz, I wouldn't have made this decision yet, but I'd be getting pretty close. That I'm really starting to doubt the core of this team. Yossi, Forsberg, Saros. The guys that have been here for almost all of this. The guys that were in the Arizona bubble. The guys that played in that Carolina series. The guys that are responsible for why you made the playoffs and had that 18-game point streak this year. But I'm really starting to doubt whether or not I can build around those guys to win. Or if I need to get better players than those guys to be able to win. I used to think when we were talking about tearing it down all those years, and, Adam Vingan, every time I talk about tearing it down, would say something crazy like, Buffalo has been tearing it down for forever, and Buffalo is terrible. And, right, I know. But, you're not going to be Buffalo. Because you got Yossi and Forsberg and at the time Ekholm and some of these guys. And I wondered if you could rebuild your team the way the Boston Bruins rebuilt their team from 2015 to 17. Now, I covered the Bruins in 13, so I know that team, and obviously I know the Bruins now and everything else. And they really built that thing on the fly. They rebuilt it on the fly around Bergeron, Marchand, Chara, and Tuukka Rask. Those are the guys that were there when they won the Cup in 2011, that were there when they were competing for it again in 18, 19, and now they're still Cup contenders. And now look, Chara's retired and Rask is retired and Bergeron is retired, and they've added those new pieces that have graduated to become those star players, and you need to do that too. But I really wondered if you could do that. Could you build it around Yossi and Forsberg and Saros? And I'm really starting to think the answer is no. I'm really starting to think it's just, you know what? Either these guys aren't good enough, which might be true, or these guys don't have it in them. that they don't have it in them in order to be able to be the big-time winners. And the reality is that this really just kind of points a finger at Saros more than anything else, because the other two guys have full no moves. So, I mean, it's really about, like, the core of this team. Like, do I need to find, a all-in top-line forward, and if Forsberg doesn't like it, say, look, man, it is what it is. But I would be I'd be nervous about this right now if I was him. About going into this offseason saying, hey, we had a great year. This team really came together. They've got good chemistry. We got players that can compete. We just need to get a couple of pieces here and there and we could win. I'd have a hard time doing that. Just because I don't know if it's specific to that game. Like, oh, if this hadn't happened, or if it's just like, this is the makeup of this group. It doesn't matter if it's that crummy Arizona bubble team, or if it's Vancouver on their 8th goalie, or if it's whoever, a legitimate cup contender in Carolina. It doesn't matter. They can't beat them. And that would be what would be going through my head right now if I was Barry Trotz, is what do I do given that fact? Phones, 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones here on the program. I do want to read this text real quick before we get into the phones. One texter says, disappointing way to end the game last night, but the series is far from over. The series has been pretty even so far, and it took 2 incredibly fluky goals for them to tie it. You want to know what the real problem was? It wasn't a fluky goal that they won on. And it wasn't fluky that it was. Ian, how quick was that into overtime that they scored?
A minute something.
That wasn't a fluke, folks. The Preds have what it takes to win the series. We won't even remember this game in 2 weeks. I mean, look, I love my team too. But sometimes we got to smell the coffee. To your phones next. 615-737-1025. Your reaction to, again, an all-timer of a meltdown. One that, when it was 3-1, I turned to my dad in the third period, and I said, this feels like a baseball game where we got the lead in the 8th inning, but boy, I don't trust the bullpen. And that's exactly what happened. To your phones next. Let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They are proud supporters of the Predators. I can promise you, Hiller is still pulling for them through and through, and they always will. Smile and save this month with Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Why? Because Hiller will make you taking care of your home systems so much easier than before. I've been using Hiller at my home for years, and I absolutely know that when it comes to Hiller, they will do a fabulous job for you. From now until April 30th, take advantage of the big savings on home systems. So enjoy up to $1,500 off select new HVAC systems, whole home water filtration and descalers, or select new whole home generators. If you've been waiting for the right time to upgrade or replace your systems, now is the time to do it. So visit happyhiller.com today for details. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters, the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
to the bench for the extra attacker with 2:06 left. Down behind the Nashville net, Yossi up the left side for O'Reilly. O'Reilly steers it out. Predators get it down the left side. Sissons, the backhander, hit the goalpost. Colton Sissons hit the goalpost with a long backhander.
I mean, I saw that, and I thought, you got to be kidding me. Texter says the missed open net goal was a killer, just a terrible effort finishing the game. Something needs to change. I don't think it was bad effort, and I will never question the Predators' effort, or at least this group's effort, because they play their tushes off every night. But, again, I think there's something mental there with this team where they can't close out games. And I think they may just not be tough enough. The other thing, too, I don't just want to throw this on the Sissons, putting the puck in the net on an empty netter. I mean, it did cost you the game. There's no way around it. If that puck goes in the net, you win. But I thought the matchups that Burnett ran out there at the end on the 5-on-6, I thought they were terrible. What the hell's Jankowski and Nyquist and Cole Smith? What are they doing in the game? Where's Beauvillier? Where's Zucker? Those two guys, I think, have been the best two skaters on this team in this playoff series. They're the two guys that are immune from the pants crapping that seems to have gone through, has been contagious around the entire dressing room, and it has not affected Beauvillier or Zucker at all. And in the case of Zucker, I mean, he is a big boy, and he is a true pro at both ends of the ice. And Beauvillier, he's everywhere. I mean, I keep seeing him in the offensive zone on the forecheck, and I'm like, he is buzzing around like a bee out. I mean, it's like, where were they last night? Instead, you're running Gus Nyquist. Why? So, I mean, we can sit here and complain about the missed empty netter. I mean, everybody knows Sissons has to hit that. But we got a question as far as the coach is concerned. I did not like the matchups that he put out there as they were trying to kill the clock. It was too much of the Scarbini line is our identity, and that's what we're going to do, and so let's put Cole Smith out there. And I'm like, if you watch the same game I've watched, Beauvillier's all over the place. Put Beauvillier in the game. Let's go to your phones. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. William is going to kick us off here on the phones. Thank you for calling and waiting patiently. William, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I watch Preds games, and I kind of look for a character of the team, like things to be positive about, and I also look for things that go, that's a statement-type game. And 3 weeks ago, we were still fighting for the playoffs. We're playing Dallas. We had a 2-1 lead with 15 seconds left in the game. We don't even give it. We're fighting for points here. We don't even give it to overtime. We lost the game in regulation, but 2-1 lead with 15 seconds left. I've made sure I made a mental note of that, and I said,
which game are you talking about? Are you talking about the Dallas game before Christmas?
No, this was about 3 weeks ago, I believe.
I have no. Ian, do you have any idea what game he's talking about?
Or maybe it was before Christmas.
Who was the opponent? Did he say?
No, he said just blew the lead, with like 5 seconds left. I think you're talking about Dallas before Christmas. See, that didn't bother me. And I understand what you're saying. Like, that didn't bother me about what happened in December and everything else. I didn't think that those games, like that they lost that game because they felt the pressure of, oh, God, this moment is too big for this regular season game against the Dallas Stars. I never felt that way. I think what I got too caught up in was the winning against playoff teams in the regular season and saying, hey, they're beating the crap out of Colorado. They're beating the crap out of Winnipeg. They're coming back and beating Vegas. They're beating this team, beating that team, and saying, hey, this is a sign that these guys are real contenders, when it's just different in the playoffs. These guys play harder in the playoffs. These guys are more locked into the game and the matchups in the playoffs. And this team, to me, it'd be one thing to say, can this team really compete against the best of the best? Could this team go out there in a series against the New York Rangers and compete? I don't know. I would lean towards no. But could they? I don't think so. But in this series, with their second and third string goalies, you've been the better team. And you can't win. And it's like, okay, why can't you win? It's not effort. It's not that the guys aren't focused. It's not that the guys don't care. It's not any of that. I think sometimes just when the going gets tough, some dudes like Tom Brady elevate their game and other dudes don't. And I think that's what you've got, a little bit of. Let's go to John, who's up next here on the program. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, John.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I'm with you on questioning this core. I mean, you know, some of these guys have been around since Trotz was the coach. I mean, you know, guys like Forsberg and Yossi, you know, I mean, I love the players themselves, you know, but, I mean, they couldn't get it done when you had Weber and PK Subban in town. And, I mean, not really any, you know, tell of them getting done on their own. And there's really no one coming up from Milwaukee either that's going to be a full-blown superstar. So I think you just got to tear it down, man.
Well, so you can't do that, and I appreciate your call, John. You can't do that because those guys have no movement clauses. Now, because like Vingan texted me in the last segment when I was talking about the core, and he said, Yossi and Forsberg, there's nothing Trotz can do about them because they have full no movements. But my point is that, you know, if I'm Barry Trotz and I'm approaching free agency, and I have the option of, on my second line next year, re-signing Jason Zucker on a 2-year, $11 million contract, or I could let Zucker go in free agency and see if Philip Tomasino or Juuso Parssinen or Joakim Kimmel or one of those guys can play the spot next year. And if they don't, well, we learned that Tomasino's not going to make it, or we learned Parssinen's not going to make it. I mean, if you think you've got a team that can compete for the cup, you re-sign Jason Zucker. But if you don't think that, you know, with Yossi and Forsberg leading the way, that you have a team that's capable of competing for the cup, then you don't make those moves because it's like, well, what's the point? What's the point of paying Jason Zucker $11 million over the next 2 years if you can't get a superstar in here that's going to make the difference? Now, as far as the actual core itself and everything, the real question in the offseason is going to be Saros. And I asked Vingan this morning, you know, he's got all the insight into the analytics and everything else. I asked him, what was Saros last night, goals allowed above expected, because I'm really disappointed in Saros. And I understand the idea the Predators have done this far too often over the years, especially in playoff games, where they'll have a 1-goal lead with 11 minutes left, and they'll turn around to Pekka Rinne, and they'll turn around to UC Saros, and they'll say, all right, boys, good job today. Time now for you to bring it home. And I'm like, I think that's a little too much to ask Rinne against Taves and Kane for 11 minutes to completely dominate the game. But that's what they do oftentimes. Well, it's different when it's 3 minutes to go. When it's 3 minutes to go with a 2-goal lead and you're a superstar goalie, you have to bring that one home. And so I asked Vingan, what was the goals above expected? You know, that analytics stat? Saros yesterday, 1.41 goals allowed above expected. Basically, UC Saros gave up an extra goal and a half yesterday. Can't have it. And for the series, Vingan told me that Saros right now has allowed 3.1 goals above expected. That means that UC Saros has allowed 3 extra goals in this series. You lost game 1 by 2 goals, but really 1 because 1 was an empty netter. You lost on Friday night by a goal, and you lost last night by a goal, and he's allowed 3 goals above expected. At some point, it is what it is. Now, when he brought up Weber or PK Subban or whatever, here is the difference between the core that got you to the Cup final and won the President's Trophy and this group. That group, yes, Yossi and Forsberg were a part of it. But the star of that group was Pekka Rinne. Defensively, Roman Yossi was a co-star with PK Subban. And Subban, when he wanted to play, and in 17 and 18 he wanted to play, when Subban was committed, he was probably the best player on defense on this team. And then up front, it wasn't just Forsberg, but Mike Fisher was still on the team. And so now all those guys are gone, and it's kind of like, all right, this is really on you. And I think we're seeing what happens if you put it on those guys. And some of it may be that they're good players. They're not great players. And in the playoffs, every other team's going to have the great players. And so your good players are going to lose to their great players. But it doesn't really matter what the reason why is. It just matters that, you know what, you can't win with these guys, can you? These guys can't close out games when they're supposed to. Whether it's that awful Arizona bubble team or whether it's a good Vancouver team that has no goaltending. 615-737-1025. More your phone, 615-737-1025. Now, I do not question this group's desire to win, and I will not do that with this team. This team plays their butts off, and they played their butts off last night. But there was something about the overtime series, the overtime series of events that really didn't sit right with me. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company and your phones, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
lost composure. Where was the breakdown specifically on the goal to get it within one and then the game-tying goal?
Well, I think there's a lot of swing in our game. In the first one and the second one, we kind of got beat up ice, and then we got a sure kind of to play to clear it. We kind of flubbed it a little bit. We fell down, then we got exposed. And again, they're going to get their looks. A lot of things happen. I think tonight we gave up a face-off goal and 2 5-on-6 goals, and I don't know if I've been in too many games where you lose games doing that.
That's a problem. And by the way, the face-off goal, Ian and I were talking about it during the break. The face-off goal came after Fabro behind the net. I believe Vancouver was getting a change. And Fabro behind the net. And I got to tell you, I am getting kind of tired of watching Fabro because he sucks. And he just slings the puck from behind the net all the way around the board. And I thought Evangelista had touched it up. So when they called icing, I was a little surprised by that. But they call icing. JT Miller goes in because, of course, McCarron's group's out there with Evangelista, and that gives, Rick Tocchet the opportunity to set up an ozone matchup, and he puts JT Miller's guys out there since JT Miller might be the best player on that team. And whoever was supposed to take the faceoff, I think, got thrown from the dot. And JT Miller got put in. And when JT Miller went in, he stopped, and he literally went over the set piece with everybody before. And he won the draw and they scored. And I cannot tell you last night how many meaningful face-offs you lost and how many meaningful face-offs you've lost in this series, to the point that on the last power play Friday night, Andrew Burnett had taken Luke Evangelista off the power play unit and had put Colton Sissons in. So it was Nyquist, O'Reilly, Forsberg, Yossi, and Sissons, only so that Sissons could win the draw, and then Sissons got thrown from the circle, and O'Reilly had to take the draw. And it's little things like that in the playoffs, it's going to get you beat. Now, the talk there was about composure. And Andrew Brett's like, I think there's just a lot of swing in our game, what he said. And I think we've seen this now, where the pants crapping of the Predators seems to be a problem at all of the wrong times, both in Games 1 and Game 4. What disappointed me, and I'm not angry about it because anger usually comes from a guy not trying hard, a guy being lazy, somebody who's not committed, those kind of things. When you try hard and you fail, it stinks, but I'm not mad about it. But what I was very disappointed in last night was that when Vancouver tied the game, there was a 15-minute break before the overtime period. And I thought to myself, Vancouver's probably going to come out here and score within the first 5 minutes. But if this group's really got some resolve, really got, some cojones, if this group's really got it inside of them, they're going to go into that dressing room and say, guys, it sucks, but none of this matters if we put one in the back of the net to begin this overtime period. And I remember against Vegas, granted 3-on-3 is different than 5-on-5, but against Vegas in the game the Predators came back in, they won the draw, and Yossi took it coast to coast, went right behind the net and put it in. A big boy play. And I wanted to see that last night. And not only did I not see that, because I don't even think the Preds really possessed the puck last night in overtime, but it was a total breakdown in the D zone between Forsberg and O'Reilly. Again, it's one thing to give up a goal because Dante Fabro's just lazy and just throwing the puck around the board. Or maybe Luke Evangelista wasn't technically over the line when he touched it up. Or maybe Evangelista didn't touch it up. It's one thing when it's those guys that screw up. Jankowski not getting a clear in Game 3. That's one thing. It's another thing when it's Forsberg and O'Reilly. And I thought that the Predators' quote-unquote response in overtime just reeked of a lack of belief. That they went into the dressing room feeling the same way I felt, which was, we're screwed. And they played like it in that overtime period. And that was disappointing. Let's go to Scott, who's up next here on the program. Thank you for calling and waiting. Go ahead, Scott.
I think bagging on or questioning Forsberg and Yossi is just beyond dumb because by your own criteria, they've been there before. They've been to a cup final. They've won a President's Trophy, and they weren't rookies along for the ride. Yossi was the top guy on the top defensive pair, and Forsberg was
He
the
was
top
not.
forward
No, he
on the
was
top
not.
line.
Scott, no, he was not. Ekholm and Subban was the
Yes,
top
he was.
defensive pair in the 17 playoffs.
That was a defensive shutdown situation, though.
Yeah,
I don't care. They're the top pair.
Saros is a different story. Saros is not giving us Vezina quality goaltending during the playoffs, and that's starting to be a pattern over. He wasn't in the Carolina series or whatever, but he's yet to show his full promise in the playoffs. So, I mean, if you can't sign him to a team-friendly extension, then, yeah, maybe you see what you can get for him, and let's roll with Askarov and Lankinen.
So I will say this, Scott. Scott, thank you for your call.
Beyond dumb to bag on. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sorry, but you can't sit there, like Barry Trotz can't sit there and talk to us about serial winners and talk about, O'Reilly and McDonough and Luke Shen and these guys that have won and really harped on the importance of winning without there being another side to the tree. And the other side, another branch is, well, what are the guys that don't win? Are they serial losers? And it's a question that has to be asked. And I'm sorry, but at no point has Roman Josi or Philip Forsberg taken over this series the way that they should be capable of, the way Brock Besser did last night. But forget about them for a second. I think that UC Saros is making the decision easier for Barry Trotz. Because, again, I don't know what for the series the goals above expected is for Casey DeSmith and Seeloffs from last night. But if you've never watched hockey before and you just sat down this series and you said, how much better is the Nashville goaltender than the goaltenders for Vancouver? I think you'd say, is he better than those goaltenders? I mean, this Smith is getting peppered in Game 3, and he gives up one goal. Seelovs, I want to say, 30-something shots you had? They were nowhere near that. And when a goalie's going to be a $8 million goalie or something like that, at some point you've got to give them. At some point you got to shut the door. And he couldn't do it last night. And I know that, that was a backdoor and an empty net, and then it was, okay. The thing about great goalies that steal games and steal series are that they make saves on shots that they're not supposed to, right? How many times did Pekka Rinne in the playoffs make a big save that you looked at it, the replay, and said, how did he make that save? And when you won in 17 in Game 7 against Anaheim, he did that. When you won, I was 16 in Game 7. When you won Games 5 and 6 and 17 against Anaheim, he did that. Game 1 against Chicago, he did that. Saros hasn't done that. And again, it'd be one thing if there wasn't a ticking time frame here as far as Saros and his contract and his last year and everything else, but it is. I think that if they get beat tomorrow night, I think Saros has probably made the Askarov-Saros decision. He's probably made that for Barry Trotz. But don't tell me I can't get on Josi and Forsberg. If I was a Vancouver Canucks fan, I'd be getting on Elias Pettersson because Brock Besser's doing his part. JT Miller's doing his part. Quinn Hughes, I think, is trying to do his part. He's getting murdered out there on the ice, by the way. And he is trying. But Pettersson has been a no-show for them. Well, right now, Forsberg and Josi, outside of Forsberg kicking the puck in the net yesterday, which I was shocked didn't come back. But outside of that, where have they been this series for you? 615-737-1025 is our phone number. I said how we're going to do this. 2 o'clock on the Predators, 3 o'clock on the Titans, 4 o'clock on the Predators, 5 o'clock on the Titans. So, The Titans' 2024 draft class is finalized. But the big pick, both literally and figuratively, is Tavondre Sweat. So what do we make of it? And what do we make of the good and the bad of this pick? And if the Titans could have done things differently, we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 through the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So the Titans picked J.C. Latham on Thursday. I had a complete meltdown. I went crazy on Friday. Then on Friday, drafted T'Vondre Sweat at 38, the defensive tackle. I almost said pass rusher, not pass rusher. The big old fat boy, the big old fat DT out of Texas. They took him at 38. We had a list of guys that were like, okay, we'll be happy if they take any one of these guys. They didn't take any of those guys. They took T'Vondre Sweat. Then they picked a bunch of other guys, day 3 guys. We'll see on the day 3 guys. You know, you never know what you're going to get with a day 3 guy. You may get Puka Nacua. You may get Des Fitzpatrick. Who knows? Day 3 is kind of a crapshoot. So I want to start on the T'Vondre Sweat pick, because this is a high-value pick. I talk about how, again, with the 7th pick, the Titans took J.C. Latham. He better be a superstar at left tackle, or else it's a bad pick. There's no reason to sit through the terrible season that we had to sit through last year if you don't get rewarded with these really, really good picks, which allow you to draft supposedly really, really good players. So when T'Vondre Sweat got drafted, I kind of had mixed emotions. So here is kind of the way that I processed this pick. Number 1, TD told all of us for weeks that the Titans were interested in T'Vondre Sweat. And I believe, Ian, that on Thursday on the Power Hour, when we talked about what do you think at 38, he was like, I think it's going to be T'Vondre Sweat at 38. Like, I think he was as direct as he could have been about that.
I think so.
I mean, so when they took him, my shock level was 0, even though he was a guy that nobody, none of the national boards had him. We weren't talking about him, whatever. My shock level was 0 because TD had told us, hey, they really, really like this guy. The second thing is, it is obvious that the Titans did love T'Vondre Sweat, because the lengths that they went to in order to vet his character, which we'll get into in a second, and everything else, clearly shows you, if you didn't really love the guy, and he's got weight issues, and he's got a DUI, and you're kind of like, yeah, just take him off the board. Just done. The third thing is, it sounds like in college, he was a complete and total beast. A buddy of mine went to the Predators game on Friday. He was sitting in the row behind me, and when the Titans made the pick, and I turned around and I looked at him, I said, what do you think of this pick? Because he went to Texas, and he watches all the Texas games, and he goes, oh, he's a beast. He's like, he's a beast. He's like, he made Byron Murphy a first-round pick. Byron Murphy had 1 good year at Texas. T'Vondre Sweat was good for 2 years. And so in college, he was a total beast, and he on the defensive line is what I call a slingshot player. The Titans have had these over the years. Robert Smith was a slingshot player. Jason Jones, a defensive tackle. Both guys paired up next to Albert Hainsworth. They did the dirty work, and Albert went to work. And I think we all know in this equation who's the guy that you want going to work. Simmons. So the idea is T'Vondre Sweat is going to eat up those offensive linemen, and then Simmons is going to go get the quarterback or the running back. So I do like that. And again, in college, that's exactly what he did for Byron Murphy. And then the fourth thing is there are major character concerns with this kid, and there is no way around it. There are questions about his weight. He got the DUI during the draft process. And there are questions about his maturity. Now, I've never met the kid, so I wouldn't be one to tell you one way or another if he's mature or if he can handle the lifestyle of the NFL or anything else like that, because I don't know. But clearly, teams were turned off by him, by all of those things. And I will say this. I do worry about the idiom, the old phrase, dumb guys stay dumb, fat guys stay fat, injured guys stay injured. Because if T'Vondre Sweat was 380 pounds last year at Texas, and he's 360-something for the draft process, and he says his goal is 350, I'm like, how likely is it that you get to 350? So that is a huge concern. And then the character issues and the DUI, that's certainly a part of the equation. See, the thing about the DUI, and I don't want to minimize a DUI, and I don't want to sit there and say, oh, it's okay, or oh, it's not okay, or whatever. I've told you guys this when Todd Downing got a DUI, that, look, good people get DUIs. They can be incredibly dangerous and reckless. And, I mean, what can happen off of a DUI is so scary and volatile that it's almost like it's a really bad thing, but it doesn't mean that bad people get DUI. Good people get DUI. So that is not my biggest issue when it comes to Sweat. My issue with Sweat is how are you going to get a DUI during the draft process? Like, this is the time of the year of your life where it's like, dude, mind your P's and Q's. If you're going to go to Pornhub, be sure to go to a private browser because you don't want the Los Angeles Chargers to find out what your porn history is. Like, every little thing is like hey man, you better be careful here. Like, you better dot all your I's and cross all your T's. And he's out there drinking and driving? That's not smart. So when I talk about dumb guys staying dumb, like, that's a dumb thing. And again, fat guys staying fat. That being said, I don't hate this pick, even though none of the draft gurus had him anywhere near the 38th pick. Because a lot of you guys do this, let Rand cook. And I think that honestly is so overblown that it makes my skin crawl every time I hear it. But this is what San Francisco does. San Francisco looks at guys that they want, that they've got to have. We got to have this player. And we take him. Well, I had him ranked on the board at 54 and doesn't matter. This is the guy we need. That's San Francisco's approach. The difference, though, is that San Francisco does a lot of that, picking at 63, right, and not 38. So there is a big difference there. And then the other thing that I kind of struggle with here is you probably should have traded down, right? Like, again, not to say that Dane Brugler is the end-all, be-all of who's a good player and who's not, or Mel Kiper or Daniel Jeremiah, but Mel had a round 3 grade on Sweat. Daniel Jeremiah ranked him 114th, and Dane Brugler had a 4th-round grade on him. And so I'm not, again, those guys, each individual guy, I think Pro Football Focus took a steaming hot dump on Tavondre Sweat on their board. Not to say that those guys are right and the Titans are wrong, but you do have to understand where reality is here and say, okay, if most people think that he's the 100th best player and we're sitting here at 38, don't you think we should maybe trade down? Or don't you think we should say, well, he's probably going to be there when the Rams pick at 52 or when Philadelphia picks at 50 or when New Orleans picks at 45. And by the way, all 3 of those teams I just mentioned all traded up in the 2nd round. And to get to 38, they know 3rd-round picks and other things are going to be involved. And it just sounds like the Titans were so in love with this kid that they didn't even consider it. So there is a lot to unpack with this. Because on one hand, I do think that he's a good player. And I do think that he fits exactly. There's a difference between fitting a need, like, oh, we need an inside linebacker, and, oh, my God, we need a guy to go with Simmons that is going to eat up 2 or 3 offensive linemen, that is going to shut down the run game so that Simmons is going to be able to feast. And I think that's what Tavondre Sweat does. So I like that. And I like the fact that the Titans absolutely freaking love the player. Because at the end of the day, the picks aren't about value. The picks are about what players do you walk away from the draft with. But, man, he's got red flags. And the Titans probably left some money on the table by not looking at a trade down. Your reaction, 615-737-1025. Now the off-the-field stuff. I said on Thursday that I don't have a problem with Rand Carthon making this pick. I don't want to hear, well, Bill Callahan loved this guy. Brian Callahan loved this guy. Chad Brinker loved this guy. This guy loved that guy. I don't want to hear that. I want Rand Carthon to make that pick because that will tell us whether or not he can draft. Well, it sounds like that's what he did here at 38 with Trevondre Sweat. But there are off-the-field issues. And if I own the team, this would be what I would tell Rand Carthon if he came up to me and said, I want to take this guy with the 38th pick. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
What was kind of his explanation of that night, of what happened?
Well, I won't go into the details of that. I know some of the stuff has been, reported, and you can read about it, and whatever he wants to share, he'll share. But basically, what he told us and what I got from my intel was it aligned, and you could see why those things happened. He was, again, I'll say from the forthright standpoint, he recognized his mistake and the part that he played in it. But, he didn't come through even though, someone hit him. He didn't use that as an out or a cop-out and play the victim part. He accepted his responsibility and what he's learned from it so far.
There you go. That was Rand Carthon talking about Javondre Sweat in the DUI. And I do love that cut right there where Rand's like, he could have used the fact that he got hit as an excuse. He was driving under the influence. His car got hit. The cop saw he was drinking and driving, and he got in trouble, but he didn't do that. And I was like, kind of sounds like you're doing that. Right? Like, but the truth is there are red flags with this kid. That's reality. Now, whether or not he's worth the 38th pick without the red flags is a different discussion. Daniel Jeremiah on his initial big board had him ranked 48th before dropping him to 114th after all the off-the-field stuff. But the red flags are real, right? The weight, that's real. 388, that's not going to work in the NFL. It's not going to work when you play 9 snaps a game. The DUI, that's real. That's a concern. The maturity, that's an issue. But the Titans say they did their homework. This was Rand Carthon when asked about the off-the-field issues with Javondre Sweat. This is what Rand Carthon said. It's kind of long, but a very thorough explanation of how the Titans went about vetting the prospect out of Texas.
How much did you guys have to vet the incident that he had a couple of weeks ago with the DUI?
Yeah, so we were his first visit after the incident occurred. And so we brought him in and spent the day with him. If you know him, he's a jovial kid. He's got a great personality, fun loving, but you could see that he was extremely affected, when we brought him in. And we spent a lot of time, talking about it. I know he was ready to talk about it with anybody that wanted to listen, and he was forthright and honest. But something that's not, documented or that has been reported is we actually went down to visit with him and the family because we wanted to know more and spend more time with not only him but his family and see the people that he surrounds himself with. So myself, Callie, Tracy Rocker, and Anthony Robinson, we flew down, to his hometown and spent the morning with him and his mom and his brother and his grandfather and really, got to know him as a person and kind of what the expectations would be for us if he was here and, kind of put that on the line. And we had some tough conversations, while we was there, and not only tough conversations with him, but tough conversations with his family in the room with the understanding that it's going to take all of us, just like it would be with any other player, just like it's going to be with JC. There's an adjustment period that all these guys have to go through that not only it's going to take us, but it's going to take the people that they spend the most time with outside of here to help us with that. And so we wanted that to, come across with his family, have a strong relationship with his representation at Clutch Sports and Nicole Lynn. And so being able to have all those different touch points, we had a lot of information, prior to everything. And again, us going down, taking that trip to spend time with him and his family is what made us comfortable making this pick.
Okay. So that was a very thorough explanation without getting into the details of, he said this happened and that happened, and his mom said that when he was playing Little League and he was 8 years old, all that kind of stuff. But here's what I would say if I owned the Titans, because I'm at least glad the Titans, didn't just, we think it'll be fine, that they actually went and they visited and all that stuff. But here's what I would say if I owned this team. If I owned this team and you came to me and you said, we've got to take this guy, Mr. Stillman, we have to take him, I would say, okay. But if these red flags are a problem, you're fired. Now are you willing to take that risk? Because what Javondre Sweat is he is Isaiah Wilson meets Caleb Farley, at least on the front end. And you're going to hear that and get mad and go, that's not fair, Jared. Those guys sucked and they're bust and John Robinson messed up and they're the reason why John Robinson's not here anymore. The A.J. Brown trade is not why John Robinson got fired. I can promise you the Titans do not regret that trade. As bad as Treylon Burks has been, the Titans do not regret the A.J. Brown trade. It's Farley, it's Wilson, it's Radence. That's why John Robinson's not here. And when I say it's Isaiah Wilson meets Caleb Farley, you know, all these things that happened with Isaiah Wilson, right? The DUI, the drinking, the partying, the out of shape, all of that stuff happened after he got drafted. In fact, I talked to Hudson Mason, who played quarterback at Georgia, who's now a talk radio host in Atlanta, and Hudson Mason was like, yeah, none of us that were around the Georgia program that, you know, again, not in it, but around the program, none of us around the Georgia program, none of us knew that Isaiah Wilson was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But the issues with Isaiah Wilson were that he was immature, that he was too fat, and that he couldn't control himself. Well, what are the problems right now with Trevondre Sweat? He's too fat, he can't control himself, and he's got maturity issues. And where Caleb Farley gets brought into this is you know this on the front end. You know on the front end that these are problems he's had. The idea of going down and talking to mama does not change reality for me of, oh, well, mom says he's okay, so he'll be okay. If it makes you, and I'm talking about Rand Carthon in this instance, and I'm the owner, if it makes you feel better about making this pick and sticking your reputation and sticking your career on it, then good for you. I want you to make picks that you believe in. But just know, like, if this doesn't work, the warning signs are there. You're fired. Just like Caleb Farley. I said the day after they drafted Caleb Farley, I said, when it came to him, I said, I got friends that work in cryptocurrency, and they are so convinced that this cryptocurrency thing is going to be the end-all, be-all. They're like, dude, you got to invest in crypto. And I'm like, I don't think so, man. That's too risky for me. I don't really totally get it. I think it's kind of stupid anyways, but knock yourselves out. And if you guys end up with private islands, I'll come visit. But for me, I'll kind of stick, with regular stuff. And Caleb Farley crashed. The warning signs are there on Trevondre Sweat. The Titans are convinced that the warning signs are not an issue. That's fine. Until it's not. The Titans were convinced Caleb Farley's back wasn't an issue. Well, that's fine. Until it's not. And so that's how I feel about all this off the field stuff when it comes to Trevondre Sweat, which is, Rand Carthon, you want to make this pick? You believe in this player? And I don't think he's a bad player either. And I think he's, again, not talking about needs on a depth chart and saying, okay, now they got that defensive lineman they needed. But I'm talking about a guy they need that can really, really slingshot Simmons into being an elite, game-changing defensive lineman. I think he's that. I think he's it. But there's some big baggage on this side of it. And if you swing and miss on the 38th pick, an incredibly valuable pick, I promise you, some of the guys that went around this time are going to be good players in the NFL. If you swing and miss on this pick because you're convinced that we should dismiss these red flags and I own the team, you're fired. It's the same as Wilson. It's the same as Farley. And then I would wonder, are you still that committed to Trevondre Sweat? And if you are, then go make the pick. But that would be the question that I would have. All right, we'll get to your phones on this next. 615-737-1025. And then there is the on-the-field element of Trevondre Sweat, which I have a thought on as well. We'll do that, and then we're to your phones. Let's talk about Window Nation. That's right, no red flags when it comes to Window Nation. Why? because I know you can trust Window Nation because I trust Window Nation. I did the free in-home estimate. I had Window Nation come on out to my home, and I said, okay, tell me about my windows. And they said, dude, you don't need to replace your windows. Your windows are fine. I said, really? They said, yeah. They said, you've got good windows. And I thought, wow, these people drove all the way out here to come and look at my windows, probably to sell some windows, and they said, your windows don't need to be replaced. That's how I know you can trust them. And not only can you trust them, but if you need to replace your windows, Window Nation is the place to go. Because if your windows won't open for fresh air or seal tight to keep out pollen and bugs, talk to Window Nation. Because right now, for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 free. Again, every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 free. So there's no limit on how much you could save. Plus, you could save even more with no interest or payments for 24 months. With proven quality, you'll get affordable windows that meet or beat the national brands. So do not miss out. Call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com. Again, no interest or payments for 24 months. That's windownation.com.
With the 38th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Trayvondre Sweat from the University of Texas, nose guard.
Yeah, this is a mammoth human being. You see the weight there, 366 pounds. This is someone who can really clog the run lanes with his big frame There are a lot of attention on him this year. When scouts got in and studied him, they liked Byron Murphy better. You saw Byron Murphy go off the board. But Sweat is just a massive human being who can push the pocket with that power, put that weight and that size to work, and just walk centers and guards back. I don't believe he's a big-time pass rusher. You see flashes of it, like this one against TCU. This was a very polarizing player.
That was Daniel Jeremiah when he was picked. Again, at 38, he was on Jeremiah's big board at 114. So make of that what you will. There are red flags there. Now, Trevondre Sweat on the field, I get it. He's a big old fat boy, and I love that on the defensive line because fat boys with feet are really hard to find. That's kind of the big thing with J.C. Latham. Now, Latham's not as fat as Sweat is, though Latham's got some girth to him. But, I mean, Sweat is a big fatty, and I like that. And I love the idea of bringing in a very talented, as far as, physically, Trevondre Sweat is concerned. I love bringing in a very talented player because you can't coach somebody that big to move that fast. So he's going to be the space eater, and that's going to free up Jeffrey Simmons to get after the quarterback. So I really, really, really like the fit with Simmons. And a lot of people have argued that Trevondre Sweat is the reason why Byron Murphy had the season he had. So with Autry gone, not that Autry was a zero technique, a true nose tackle or anything like that, but he plugs the Autry spot and is really more of a true nose tackle, a true space eater, a true run stuffer, a true that kind of thing that I think will allow Simmons to be freed up to do more of the glamorous stuff, which is to get after the quarterback. So I get the pick. Bringing the player in, that I don't have a problem with. It's the off the field I got a little bit of an issue with, and the where they picked him that I've got a little bit of an issue with. But that we shall see. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Kyle has been waiting forever. He's up next here on the program. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Kyle.
You're so welcome, Jared. I like the pick. I like my defensive tackles, defensive linemen, Nasty, John Randall, John Henderson. Albert Haynesworth would rip your helmet off and kick you in the face. I'm not saying that he is crazy, but we all need somebody a little edgy or whatever. Every good football team needs that guy you got to reel back in. I was that guy on my team. I get into a fight almost every game. People had to tackle me and pull me off. It's just, but they appreciate it. It's just who it is.
But that's not really the problem with him. The problem with him is the fact that he does stupid stuff off the field.
He's 21, and I was an idiot at 21 too. A lot of us were. So I think now,
I know, but this is the NFL.
With Jeffrey Simmons, I think he's going to work. I think he's learned his lesson.
I know. You guys thought Farley was going to work.
He has to be feeling like an idiot right now, getting a DWI on the way to his interview with his employer. I assume he feels stupid, but he's the one guy that can improve the entire defense.
Here's my problem with the idea of him feeling like an idiot, Kyle.
Rushers. He opens the lanes
Kyle.
for linebackers to
Kyle.
fill the hole, and that just helps the secondary.
Kyle, thank you for the call. Here's the problem, though, when you say that he feels like an idiot. I'm sure he feels like an idiot. I don't know that. I haven't talked to him. There is a problem with that, though, and nobody really wants to say this, but I'll say it. There's a chance that he maybe feels like an idiot for doing something stupid because maybe, and again, I don't know this guy, but maybe he is that's the red flag. The red flag is, he must feel like an idiot. Right, he must feel like an idiot because he did a really moronic thing. So the question is he a young guy that made a mistake, or is he an idiot? And I don't know the answer to that, and that's why the Titans have got to do their homework in the draft. That's the whole point. And I expect every single one of you to love this pick. I expect every single one of you to assume that the red flags mean nothing because you've never thought red flags meant anything. Every single player with a red flag, you guys, when the Titans acquire him, go, and then as soon as it doesn't work because of the red flags, you go, John Robinson is an idiot for trading for Julio Jones. I mean, Ian, remember when I was the bad guy saying don't trade for Julio Jones? I was the bad guy. I did the News 2 Sunday night show. The Titans signed Jadeveon Clowney on Labor Day weekend of 2020. And I did the News 2 Sunday night show with Corey. And I said, this is a bad signing. And I got killed. And all the red flags were there with Clowney. The guy does not produce. The guy is lazy. The guy is always hurt. The guy is, and you guys, no, those things don't matter. Julio Jones hamstring, that doesn't matter. Caleb Farley's back, that doesn't matter. Jared, we got the best corner in the draft with the 21st pick. You guys always do that. You're doing it now with L'Jarius Sneed's knees. Nobody else in the NFL wants L'Jarius Sneed's knees. Nobody. Minnesota offered a much better trade and took it back because of the knees. But you guys are like, oh, no, it'll be no problem there. How can you think that? How can you think that? To sit there and not say, hey, man, this is a real risk, but I do like the player, that is different than saying, oh, I don't think it'll be a problem. And this idea that, well, Simmons will get him going in the right direction. I'm sorry, is Simmons the coach? Like, I don't. Okay. One texter says, how is it not skeptical to trust the Titans with the scouting given the past history? I agree. And the Titans, like what the Titans are trying to do is they're trying to massage the red flags by saying, hey, we did our homework on this guy. And it sounds like they did. You know, I will give Rand Carthon credit and Brian Callahan and Tracy Rocker, and I will give them credit because if they loved a guy and there were concerns and they didn't do the homework, they didn't fly down there, they didn't meet with the family, they didn't have the tough conversations, if they didn't do that, I would annihilate them for that. So, I mean, it's a good thing that they looked at a guy they loved and they said, well, let's go make sure. Like, we think, but let's make sure. But again, it's still a massive risk. They know it's a risk. They know they're taking a massive risk here. But to sit there and act like, oh, no, these red flags, this is going to be fine. I know. You guys always say that. Always, always, always say that. That you're not worried about the red flags. One texter says, I've mispronounced his name 25 times today. Is it not Tavondre Sweat?
I thought so.
Play the Warren Moon announcing the pick. Play it again. Let's see what the name is.
With the 38th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Trayvondre Sweat.
So it's Trayvondre and not Trevondre.
He said Trayvondre.
So it's Trayvondre even though
there's no R there?
Correct. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right, fine, whatever. Chad says, Dak Prescott got a DWI before the draft, and he's been a great leader ever since. Yeah. Did Dak Prescott have weight issues in college? Did Dak Prescott play at 388 pounds? Because that is the fear here, is that I think Rand Carthon said there's a threshold that they have for Sweat. What that said is it's like, son, you cannot get this fat. And I believe, and again, this is kind of like a maturity. Can you handle all of the lifestyle, and can you handle the money, and can you handle all of this? That's the question. And a lot of guys, we don't know. But I'll also say this, just because it worked for Dak Prescott doesn't mean it will work for everybody else. And I keep using Isaiah Wilson as the example. All of the reasons that Isaiah Wilson didn't pan out, Isaiah Wilson had great tape in college. I mean, we watched. During the COVID shutdowns, we would do the show from my house. Floyd would show up at 1:45 every day, and we had two TVs going. One would be the NFL Network, and the other would be something else. And during the COVID shutdowns, we'd watch a lot of college games. And we'd look at players that the Titans might be interested in drafting. And we watched the SEC championship game, LSU and Georgia. And we watched it because LSU had a handful of guys like Kaylavon Chason and Christian Fulton, and that might be of interest to the Titans. And then Isaiah Wilson was obviously of interest to the Titans. And Isaiah Wilson, I mean, he was a great prospect. He was big. I mean, he needed work, but he was big. He had great feet. Isaiah Wilson, the college version of Isaiah Wilson, when we talk about moving J.C. Latham over to left tackle, you could have done that with Isaiah Wilson because his feet were so good at his size. He was a great pass protector. But the reason why Isaiah Wilson didn't work out is because of all the off-the-field issues. Well, that's kind of the thing here, which is, is this a blip on the radar? And with the coaching and with his heart and everything else, is this going to work or is it not? And again, I give the Titans credit because they went down there and they did their homework. But doing your homework doesn't matter if you fail the test. And whether or not he ends up overcoming the red flags, to me, that is what is going to be whether or not that you just, did the homework. So TD has texted me and said that Warren Moon mispronounced it. There is no R. It's Tavondre. Is that not what we've been saying? Is it Tivondre?
I don't think so.
I think it's Tavondre. Tavondre Sweat. That's what it is. I don't think we've said anything different, have we? Maybe?
Well, I don't think so.
I think we've said Tavondre. Robert in Spring Hill says, if anybody has red flags about the future of a team as the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, what were they thinking with Michael Penix Jr.? Call Atlanta radio for that one. I will say this. I love the idea of a succession plan at quarterback. I do like Michael Penix. Now, I don't like him at 8th overall. I do like Michael Penix. And I'm not a believer in drafting for need. But when you sign a quarterback to a $100 million contract, and I think it was a 4-year deal for Cousins, that is saying that we don't need a quarterback for 4 years. At least 3. And so I don't know what the Falcons are thinking. But, I guess. Whatever. All right, what about the day 3 picks? What do we make of that? I'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
With the 106th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Cedric Gray,
I like him.
linebacker, UNC.
So they didn't get to the 1K, but they got a pretty darn good player.
Yeah, he's the best linebacker available. I thought he would be gone last round. I'm a little surprised he's still sticking around. Excellent cover ability. He's an outstanding blitzer. And as you'll see here, the eyes work well as well. The change of direction, able to read and react and make a play in space. The coverage ability that I discussed. Look, if you can't cover at linebacker right now, you cannot get on the field or stay on the field the way the game is played. The instincts, here he is again. We have to show the App State, really, guys? Thanks.
Yes, that's cold.
Put that one up. Thanks, Ben. Then you see him again here as a blitzer. CD, I mentioned that reference there, what he can do. Athletic linebacker. I like this move a lot.
And how about a little bit of a legacy move? You remember the guy they had before that came from Zach Brown, came from the University of North Carolina, a run, chase, hit linebacker. Cedric Gray could be the next one.
This is also a guy who has led the team in tackles for 3 years, but I would add special teams demon. He'll play right away on special teams too. They'll love that.
Maybe he'll be the next Zach Brown. Who knows? That was Charles Davis. I actually thought about cutting that part out because I actually think that makes the analysis worse. But I like Charles, so I left it in there. Cedric Gray, the Titans took him in the 4th round. I was listening to SiriusXM's NFL radio draft coverage. I think they do a fabulous job with their draft coverage, because they had Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl was part of their crew, and Rick Neuheisel was part of their crew, and Jim and Pat were part of their crew. And I was listening to it, and when he went off the board at 106, those guys were like, wow, that is a good player right there as an inside backer. And as a Titan fan, it was hard for me not to get excited about that. But I do want to say this. I think a lot of people look at that pick at 106 of Cedric Gray and they say, okay, there is the green dot inside backer that will start. He and Kenneth Murray will be your inside backers for the Titans, and they got that need filled. And I would just say that I am cautious of expecting a day 3 guy to be a year 1 starter. And I'm cautious of putting the expectation on him because I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably doing your depth charts right now in your head, right? Like Latham at left tackle, Skoronski at left guard, Cushenberry, Brunskill, and I don't know who's going to play right tackle, but whatever. At right tackle, Ridley and Hopkins and Burks at wide receiver, and Pollard and Spears at running back and Levis at quarterback. And so as you're putting out your depth charts, you're probably thinking Cedric Gray at inside backer. And I would just say, hold up now. Let's not put this expectation on this player. Because over the last 10 years, by my count, the Titans have had 3 guys that have started right away as day 3 picks. Now, guys like Amani Hooker, Chigakonkwo, Jayon Brown, LaShawn Sims, those guys started later in their careers, but I'm talking about day 1, taken on day 3 of the draft, starting right away, a la Puka Nacua. Avery Williamson, Tajay Sharp, and Daquan Jones. Those are the 3 guys. And I'm not going to throw Jalen Duncan in there because I don't want to make the list worse, but Jalen Duncan started way too much last year than he probably should have. So let's keep the expectations real around here. Williamson, Tajay Sharp, and Daquan Jones started as day 3 picks right away over the last 10 years. So be careful. It may be better off that the Titans either sign somebody or put Jack Gibbons out there. I can't do the Jack Gibbons thing, but put Jack Gibbons out there and let Cedric Gray develop, be a special teams player, and everything else before just saying, okay, you need to wear the green dot and be the inside backer. That would make me a little nervous. The Titans took Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the corner out of Louisville, in the 5th round, and all I know about him is during the morning when I was looking at who was still available and who the Titans might target, I texted the athletic director at Louisville, Josh Hurd, and I said, hey, is Jarvis Brownlee is he a good kid? Is he and he said he's a great kid. Great kid. And so when the Titans took him, I texted Josh and I was like, hey, are you cool if I tell everybody that you said, whatever? And he sent a little bit more and said, hey, he can hit. He said he's a good corner. He can hit. He said if he's healthy, he's a really good player. And so that got me a little excited. Somebody tweeted me and said, do you think the AD at Louisville would tell you if he was a bum? Yes, I do. Now, I don't think that he'd want me to share that with you guys, and I probably wouldn't. But he would. And he really, really, really likes the Jarvis Brownlee pick. So I think that's a good step in the right direction. And then all the other guys, we're talking about 6th and 7th round guys, if they make the team, that's good enough. I do think that receiver out of Tulane, that, he's got some speed. And they say he's a slot receiver and a punt returner. So if I was Kyle Phillips, I'd be a little nervous because I don't know if there's all those, all those roster spots to go around of guys that only punt return, play the slot, and don't do other things on special teams. And if this kid is a better punt returner than Phillips, and I can't imagine that he won't be a better punt returner than Phillips, and he can stay healthy more than Phillips, and he's got that speed, he could be a pretty good player. So, on day 3, I do, again, I don't know about these guys, because I didn't watch North Carolina play. So I can't sit there and tell you about Cedric Gray this, Cedric Gray that, but the guys on NFL radio were fired up for the Titans when they made that pick. I just struggle of saying, hey, let's not put too high of an expectation on the 106th pick right away. And if he is Puka Nacua and he starts day 1 and he's Cortland Finnegan and he's great. But let's just be a little cautious here. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We're back to the Titans at 5 o'clock. Coming up next, UC Saros is making a decision that Barry Trotz is going to have to make one way or another a lot easier on Barry Trotz. We'll get to that coming up next as we react to the Predators down 3-1 after an epic meltdown last night. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Predators with an all-time meltdown last night. I don't want to rehash what happened. It was so bad. But it probably, and I keep saying that word probably, and I'm not saying hopefully, I'm just saying probably, just because I think something's going to happen doesn't mean I want it to happen. But it probably ends any chance they had of winning the series, which is the series they should have won, given the fact that Vancouver has played a backup goalie in 3 of the 4 games and will probably continue to play a backup or third-string goalie in Game 5 tomorrow night at Vancouver. So I keep thinking to myself about kind of the big picture of this series. Because I do think that in these little games, you know, the little this, the little that, those are small, those are kind of micro moments, right? Like Sissons hitting the post. That's not really a macro opinion on the future of the Predators or where they're headed as an organization or anything like that, other than Colton Sissons hit the post. I don't think that's a reason to get rid of Colton Sissons, that he hit the post. And I don't think that it means that Colton Sissons is a bad player because he hit the post, but he hit the post. But then there are the big decisions that have to be made, the macro choices. And I keep wondering if Barry Trotz is using this series, which looks like is going to end in favor of Vancouver, as kind of the determining factor as for what he's going to do with his goaltender. Because the truth is the Nashville Predators have got to decide sooner rather than later what the future of UC Saros is. UC Saros is signed for 1 more year at $5 million. After this upcoming season, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. The market for Saros after the Connor Hellebuck contract is probably around $8 million a season. UC Saros in this series has allowed 3.1 goals over expectation. So in this series, in which the Predators lost Game 1 by technically 2 goals, but really 1 because 1 was an empty netter. They lost Game 1 by 1 goal, they lost Game 3 by 1 goal, and they lost Game 4 in overtime by 1 goal. UC Saros has allowed over 3 goals over expectation. He's been terrible. When this playoff series is over, UC Saros' record as a starter will probably be 4-12 as a starter in the playoffs. I believe it was 3-8 going into the series, and so maybe it was 3-7, whatever. Bad. This will have been his 3rd playoff series. It will have been his 3rd playoff series loss. At some point, with the decision looming ahead of the draft, ahead of free agency this year, where teams are trying to build themselves up for next year, doesn't it feel like UC Saros is making the decision for Barry Trotz? And I think the easy thing to do is to compare him to Pekka Rinne, because, well, quite frankly, Pekka Rinne is the gold standard. And with Pekka Rinne, I know, even though sometimes Pekka wasn't perfect in the playoffs. I didn't think Pekka was very good in 2015, and I don't think he was very good in 2018. But Pekka Rinne stole series for this team. Stole series, not just games, but entire series. The 2017 Chicago series, Rinne. The 2017 Anaheim series, especially after Johansson and Fisher got hurt and they went on the road and they called up a bunch of guys from Milwaukee and they ended up getting a goal from Colin Wilson out of nowhere, and they ended up, that was a Rinne steal. Rinne stole the next game too. Rinne stole games in the Vancouver series in 2011. He was fabulous in the Anaheim series in 2011, and he was great in the Detroit series in 2012. Pekka Rinne was a bona fide playoff goalie stealer. He won games and won series for you. Saros really hasn't done that. And again, we may not be having this discussion in a different context. If the Predators hadn't used the 11th overall pick in 2020 on Yaroslav Askarov. But guess what? They did. And Askarov is ready. Last night, I was looking at the AHL stats of Arturas Silovs, the goalie you played against and lost to last night, and his AHL numbers were okay. Then I compared them to the AHL numbers of Askarov, and it is not even close. Askarov at 21 is a significantly better goalie than Silovs at 23. And I'm not saying that that means that Yaroslav Askarov is ready to be a star in the NHL, but he probably is ready for the NHL. So if he's ready for the NHL, and he's bigger than Saros, he's younger than Saros, he's got more talent than Saros, and I know in my heart that I can't win with Saros as my goalie, isn't the decision made for me? And again, I think this is the last data point that Barry Trotz will have before he has to make this decision. Because if you see Saros as the goalie on this team next year, given the fact that they can't trade Forsberg, they can't trade Yossi, and they've got too many veteran guys that will keep you afloat, you're going to be in playoff contention next year. And so if you keep Saros, you can't get to the deadline and then say, well, you know, we're 4 points up on a playoff spot, so let's not trade the goalie, because that's what's going to happen. So you got to make the decision at the draft. You got to make it in late June. If this is the last data point, isn't this kind of the horse leaving the barn? Again, if I'm going to pay a goalie $8 million, I need to win because of the goalie. Not, well, there was nothing he could have done on that play, and therefore no. And do I think Saros is better than he's played in the series? Sure. But none of it matters if I think you're better than if you can't do it, if you can't perform that way. And in 3 playoff series, he hasn't won them games. And that's what an $8 million goalie is supposed to do. So if I was Barry Trotz, and I'm not Barry Trotz, but if I was Barry Trotz, I think I'd be sitting up there right now thinking that next season Yaroslav Askarov is going to be my starting goalie. And the first thing I would do is I'd re-sign Kevin Lankinen, because if, let's say, Askarov's not ready and I have to play Lankinen, I'm not going to win as many games, but guess what? I mean, if I can't win in the playoffs with Saros, how different is it than if I'm playing Kevin Lankinen? What's the line that Branch Rickey told Ralph Kiner back in the day? We finished in last place with you. We can finish in last place without you. I can get beat in the playoffs with you. I get beat in the playoffs without you. And so I know that, again, well, the Besser goal, the second goal last night, that was a little tic-tac-toe. He was wide open on the back door, and he put it in what Saros was supposed to do. And then he made the initial save on Besser, and then Besser collected the rebound, and Besser was able to put it back into the net. And it's okay, you know, what's he supposed to? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. These really, really good goalies, these Henrik Lundqvist goalies, they steal games. They steal series. Saros doesn't do that. And in a league with a real cap, although Las Vegas is pushing it, in a league with a real cap, with a young goalie at Milwaukee, to me, it makes too much sense that I think UC Saros has proven to us that he's not Pekka Rinne. And if he's not Pekka Rinne, then it's time to see next year if the other guy is. Because if you're going to be this team that doesn't have big boy forwards, that doesn't finish third in the draft, to be able to pick up and you can't win with Saros. It feels like you can't win with Saros. The stats are telling you you can't win with Saros. So why would you re-sign him? And if you're not going to re-sign him, then you need to trade him. And so I think Saros is making that decision for Barry Trotz with his play in this series. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Add that to the list. 615-737-1025. The most disappointing aspect of the Predators series, other than the fact that they completely and totally blew last night, is that given the circumstances, the Predators should win this series. They should have won this series. And they're not going to. Or at least it feels like they're not going to. There are some tough realities that I think we have to accept, and we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Cole pokes the rebound down around Ryan O'Reilly. Back of the net, right in front to score! Elias Lindholm wins it after 1:02 of overtime, and the Canucks take a 3-1 series lead over Nashville.
Didn't it kind of feel like, and Pete would never do this, but didn't it kind of feel like Pete could have said right there, And that'll do it for the series. We'll see y'all on Tuesday, and we'll see. And the most disheartening part of this series is the fact the Predators should have won this series. Backup goalies. So to me, there are kind of 4 truths that I feel in particular when it comes to this series. The first one is this is a series that the Predators should have won. Won it by now? Maybe not. You know, they didn't play well in game 2, and even though they won it, they weren't very good. But it should absolutely, without a question, it should be 2-2. And they pooped their pants, and that's why it's not. But it probably should be 3-1 Predators. And the Predators with Vancouver, with their injuries and goal, this should be a slam dunk, you win the series. But you've blown it. And it's really hard to envision this Predators team against that Canucks team winning 3 games in a row, including 2 in that building in Vancouver. So that's the first kind of reality point. That is just, again, it's not what I want to say, but it's what I have to say because it's the truth. The second thing that I've noticed from this series, not that we didn't know this coming into the season, not that we didn't know this at the deadline, not that we didn't, the Predators need better players. When Vancouver can get their best players all on the ice at the same time, Pettersson, Besser, Miller, Hughes, Lindholm, when they can get their best players out there, the Predators absolutely cannot stop them. That is why Vancouver has been a thorn in your side on the power play in this series and with the 6-on-5. Because when they just take out their top skaters and they stick them out there, there is nothing the Predators can do. It doesn't matter which defensive pair is on the ice. It doesn't matter which forwards are out there. But when they put all their guys out there, it is a hang on to your tush. And at no point, I think, is it a hang on to your tush if you're a Canucks fan when Forsberg and O'Reilly and Yossi and those guys are on the ice. I think Vancouver fans are holding on to their tush because they're playing backup goalies that have sub-900 save percentages. So, I mean, again, almost take any team in these playoffs, and they're going to have a better trio or, group of players than Vancouver has or the same level of good. And that's a problem. So, I mean, I think the Predators are going to probably need some better players. The hope is that some of these guys you've drafted, Kemmel, those kind of guys can eventually be that. But I would say that it'd be nice if that happened sooner rather than later. Kind of the third little nugget is I've had enough with the fourth line. That's our identity line, Jared. That's your AHL line. Those guys are AHL players. Now, look, Kiefer Sherwood has been playing his ass off this series. And that line was a big part of kind of what sparked the turnaround at the beginning of that run. But this is the playoffs. And at the end of the game, the guys he was running out there on the ice, not Beauvillier, who I thought was excellent last night, has a ton of playoff experience, not Jason Zucker, who is a playoff pro, but guys like Jankowski and McCarron and Craig Smith and you're not going to win games by playing those guys as much. And I understand some of it is that he doesn't want to play Tommy Novak. And that's another problem which needs to be rectified, by the way. But in crunch time, I don't want Mark Jankowski on the ice. I don't want Cole Smith on the ice. Well, Jared, they're tough to play against, and they're right. But they're not talented, and that's the problem. So enough with the fourth line. Play them like a fourth line. I know they'll hit some guys, and you want them to hit Quint Hughes, and they've done it. But, I mean, the best forechecker I think the Predators have had in this series is Beauvillier. He's on your second line. And then kind of the third, again, or I should say the fourth kind of reality here. The idea of the Predators winning Game 5 in Vancouver really feels like a stretch. And I have always told people that the NHL playoffs are so funky and weird. And like what happened in last night's game really means nothing 99.9% of the time in Game 5. But I think that Game 5 was so debilitating that I find it hard to believe that the Predators are going to be able to dig themselves out of this. And that it felt like the way they played in overtime was just head down, just it felt like they were sulking with their play in that overtime, and it's hard for me to imagine that this is not going to be the case tomorrow night. And I will give them credit. I listened to Evangelista with Max after the game was over, and I heard everything that was said in the locker room, and they have the right attitude and the right spirits and everything else. But again, I find it hard to believe that they're going to win tomorrow night. I will say this, though. I mean, when these guys talk about, hey, man, we just have to win this one game. This is hockey, man. Anything happens in hockey. It does feel like they believe it a little bit, which is important. I remember after the Predators won in overtime against Chicago in Game 3 in 17, and they won. They were down the whole game. Forsberg got a goal in the third period to tie it, and then Kevin Fiala, off of a pass from James Neal, put it in there to win the game in overtime. And the next day, the Blackhawks didn't practice, but they had a media availability. The league requires you to be available every day, which is why the Predators were available at the airport today before they flew out to Vancouver. And so the league requires you to be available every day. And so the Blackhawks had an availability at the Omni. And I think it was Duncan Keith and maybe Brent Seabrook. And they did the media availability, and I watched the video that the Blackhawks posted online in 2017, and those dudes were just almost zombie-like, just staring there saying, yeah, well, we have to put together 3 good periods tomorrow and see what happens and go from there. And, it's like, exactly. Yep. And I didn't feel that vibe from the Predators. But again, I still have a hard time believing they're going to win tomorrow. So those are kind of the realities of the series. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. We are to yours next. Plus, Andrew Burnett's a great coach. I like Andrew Burnett. I told Andrew Burnett after he got hired, I said, hey, man, I like you. I'm glad they hired you. You guys obviously know how I felt about the old coach. But if I don't like something, I'm going to say it. And Andrew Burnett was like, yeah, man, I understand it. You got, whatever. Now there's something I don't like. And we'll get to that next, and then your phone. Stillman & Company, 1025-1063 The Game. And we'll be giving away something later this hour. Ian, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'm sure you will tell me before I give it away. I think it's pretty good. So we will do that later this hour as well. Stillman & Company, 1025-1063 The Game.
Fed to the side of the right circle. Back out for Hughes. Hughes for Miller. His shot to the side of the net. Shoveled over. And Saros tried to get there in time but could not. So with the extra attacker, the Canucks cut the Predators' lead to 1 goal. Yossi tried to clear it. Quinn Hughes keeps it in. Drops it back. Here is a shot stopped and a rebound try. Besser scores. Brock Besser picked up the rebound and has tied the game with 6.2 seconds left. 2 extra attacker goals here by the Canucks. And a hat trick for Brock Besser.
The first one's kind of backdoor, right? He got a kind of empty net, and then second one there wasn't, I don't know, was 6 seconds left maybe. From my standpoint, I saw Miller coming down, and I just tried to go full block mode and not let him get it to net. I think it hits my stick and then off Juice pad, and yeah, I don't know. I would have to look at it. There's probably things that we can correct and do better. But yeah, it's too quick now to really assess what happened.
Well, it was a bounce here, and it was a net there, and it was a pass there, and it was off the stick there, and there is some truth to that. But there's one thing that I haven't talked a lot about so far in the show that I do want to get into today, which is the coaching. Because I am an Andrew Brunette fan, and I think Andrew Brunette is a great coach. But I am disappointed in what I've seen in this series because there are some management mistakes. You know, I was talking to a former NFL head coach over the weekend, and we were talking about how in baseball the head coach is called a manager. And he said the way that coaching is nowadays, and we've talked about this with Belichick and Vrabel, and the idea of an authoritarian ruler doesn't work as far as coaching is concerned anymore because society dictates that everybody wants to feel appreciated. So we all have to work together. And he says that coaches nowadays in the NFL are really more managers than they are anything else. And I think that, again, when you're on the bench in a Stanley Cup playoff game, you are managing the game. And I think his management in this series has been questionable. Now, he's not the reason that they're down 3-1, but he's on the list. And there's a handful of things in particular that I do not like. Number one, it's time for Tommy Novak to head to the press box. I wanted them to scratch Novak last night. I thought it was time to put Juuso Parssinen in there, who's got a big body and really hasn't played in the NHL in a while, but is a capable enough player. And when Parssinen is performing well, he's not a bad player. Tommy Novak can't play in this series. Quite frankly, I think I kind of regret that they gave him an extension to begin with. Because I remember when Elliott was going on the midday show before the deadline and was talking about how teams might be interested in giving up a first-round pick for Tommy Novak. And I was like, a first-round pick for Novak? And they gave Novak a modest contract at 3 years, $3 million. So if he sucks, it's not a big deal. Novak doesn't do anything in the playoffs. He's too small. He's too timid. He's too soft. And against Vancouver with those big bodies and those big defensemen, he doesn't do anything. And so when you decide you're not going to play Tommy Novak, what you end up doing is you basically end up not playing his entire line. And what does that mean? It means more time for the Scarbini line. It means more time for McCarron and Smith and Sherwood. And you don't win playoff series with those guys. So that's the first thing. And I'll be shocked. I mean shocked if Novak is in the lineup tomorrow night. That's the first thing that I find at least a little questionable. The second thing, and this is an Andrew Brunette problem, this would not necessarily be a head coach problem, although the head coach would certainly be a part of the discussion here. But this is specifically an Andrew Brunette problem because he is a power play savant. Power play sucks. This series power play has sucked. I thought 0 for 15 against Dallas was bad in 2019, and this is up there. I believe, Ian, it's 1 for 14 right now.
I believe that is correct.
That's almost as bad as the 0 for 15. And that 0 for 15 against Dallas is kind of the initial cog that got Peter Laviolette fired. Now, I'm not saying Andrew Brunette should be fired. I'm not saying there should be any discussion about Andrew Brunette being fired. That's not what I'm saying. But Andrew Brunette is a power play guru, and the power play freaking sucks in this series. So that, to me, is on him. And then third, I know it's talking about what's on the list of the problems and not saying, you are the problem. Because if Colton Sissons puts that empty netter in there, we're not talking about any of this. But the lineups that he played last night at 5-on-6, I'm still angry about. I always talk about feeling players in the game. Sometimes guys are out there, and I'm like, is he on that team? Like, did he play last night? He's like, did he play last night? He had 19 minutes of ice time. I'm like, what? He played? The two guys I felt the most last night for the Predators were Anthony Beauvillier and Jason Zucker. Now, I think Jason Zucker is an example of what this team doesn't have, which is a group of veteran, legitimate NHL players. I'm not talking about these Michael McCarrons that, spend half their career in the AHL. I'm talking about guys that are 10, 12-year NHL players that are bona fide NHL dudes that could play for any team. Zucker is one of those guys. Zucker is big. Zucker matters in the offensive zone. Zucker can hold his own. Zucker can get in front of the net. Zucker can push people around. Zucker is a good, solid player. You don't have enough of that. I look at Carrier and I'm like, is Carrier good? I don't know. And then Beauvillier, I thought when they traded for him, I looked at his stats and I'm like, I think this guy sucks. And then Barry came on the show after the deadline, and Barry was like, look, I coached Beauvillier. I know Beauvillier. He's going to fit right in. He's exactly what we need. He's a playoff player. Like, we need him. And I'm like, okay, I guess. You're winning all these games, so who am I to complain about it? And then Beauvillier didn't do anything during the regular season. And then in the playoffs, Beauvillier's been awesome. And last night, I thought he was their best forechecker. And so Vancouver goes 6-on-5, and they're coming. And those are big bodies, right? Besser, big body. Miller, big body. That's who they're putting on the ice. They're not putting Connor Garland and Lafferty out there on the ice. And he goes with Cole Smith, Gus Nyquist, Jankowski. And not to say that Nyquist is a Scarbini, but I just don't think that defensively he's the other guys. And, of course, Nyquist fell down. And I'm sitting there thinking, I've watched Jason Zucker dictate this. And Zucker's been the best skater this team has this series. And he's not out on the ice in the most critical moments. Beauvillier was the best forechecker last night. I think Beauvillier, he's like a defensive Arvidsson. He's kind of small, but he's zipping around everywhere. Well, when Vancouver can move the puck as quickly as they do, and it's hard for you to get a stick on it, that's the guy you need out there, is the little bumblebee that can just get his stick on it and just break something up. Not big Cole Smith, who's trying to line up at left end and go rush the passer.
Okay, so let's see. The Besser, the first one that they scored, it was Lauzon, Forsberg, O'Reilly, Carrier, and Saros and Nyquist. So it was the top line, and it was the Lauzon.
That was the second one, right?
That was the first Besser goal with 17-11 left in the game to get him within one.
You mean 17-11 gone in the period?
Correct.
So but Nyquist fell down on the second one.
So it was Nyquist, Jankowski, McDonough, Yossi, Saros, and O'Reilly for the tying goal on the ice.
Where's Beauvillier? He didn't get in.
So, you had your top line out there, and you had Carrier and Lauzon for the Besser to get him within one. And then you have your best line. I guess you had Jankowski out there for a face-off situation.
Which is another problem, by the way. It's not the coach's fault, but it is another problem.
Yeah, they've been
awful in the dome.
They have not been good on. I don't know why O'Reilly kept getting kicked out of the faceoff dot yesterday, but he got kicked out constantly. And then in overtime, it was the top line, and it was Shen and McDonough.
So I don't have a problem with the lineup that he put out there in overtime. I think the Predators had just lost all faith by the time they got to overtime. But Zucker and Beauvillier, those were the guys that I felt the most defensively, and he didn't put them on the ice in that 3-minute period. And I'll say that I love this Zucker. I love him. I mean, I don't know if they're going to be any good next year. I don't know if there's any point to re-sign him because we need to see whether or not Tomasino and, Kimmel and Svechkov and those kind of guys are any good, and that may take away a spot if you re-sign Zucker, but I love Zucker, especially for a 6th-round pick. Woof. But I wanted both him and Beauvillier on the ice last night, and I kept sitting there saying, where are they? Put Sissons out there. Obviously, Sissons hit the post, and Sissons is on the line with those guys, but again, I'm not saying that Andrew Brunette is the reason why the Predators are going to lose this series, but he's on the list because I don't think his management's been up to par that I expect from him. All right, more of your phones. Plus, the biggest fan complaint of the weekend that I still I think it was overrated by the fans. The organization won't say it, but I will. I think the fans made too big a deal of something that I didn't think was a big deal at all. We'll do that next. And your phones. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
We're pretty proud of how the whole sports world sees our experience in the game. Of course, everything starts at center ice out. Like it just does. Fun team, great team, 3 very bizarre playoff games. That should be enough. The one thing that we pride ourselves on is we try to get out of the way of the fans. We want the energy from Broadway to spill right through the building. That wasn't always the case. And, over the past 15 years, I've had the pleasure of being here. It's let's do some cool things. Let's do some fun things. Be candid with you, Game 3, we tried a few new things because we listen to our fans. And when they say, look, you can't run the same song again. You can't do that. Let's try something a little bit new, a little bit fresh. And we did. And to be candid with you, our pregame wasn't as good as it normally is. And, it's great that, I get a couple mentions, not a couple hundred mentions on Twitter about, what a schmuck I am and how dumb you are, you're tone deaf. I love the fact that our fans, tell us what they like and what they don't like. And I really mean that. I hate criticism, but you thrive on it, so you hear it a little bit. And we have to make sure that we're doing the things that our fans want to see and do and hear. Sometimes we'll challenge it, but I don't mind failing. We'll try some new things, and if we fail, and you kind of retool it. And, tonight is going to be very different than it was Friday night. In Game 6, ideally, if we're playing one, we'll be different again, for the better. So I like that our fans reach out.
That was Sean Henry last night on Stillman and Company before the game, before Game 4. So there was a lot of complaining. Ian, I don't know if you saw any of this, but there was a lot of complaining over the weekend after Game 3 about the Predators' game operations and the atmosphere in the building and everything else.
Okay.
And I said yesterday on our special Stillman and Company program, which hopefully there will be one on Sunday of next week ahead of Game 7. I wouldn't cross my fingers on it, but we'll see. But I thought that it was a little overblown. Like Alex Daugherty did like a whole thread by thread, point by point, kind of breakdown of his thoughts of it, and they're totally different than mine. And the Predators fans were just going crazy about, they didn't play the Run This Town song, and they didn't this, and they didn't that, and they didn't this. And I'm like, guys, the atmosphere is made up by the fans. It's not made up by the team's game ops. Atmosphere is made up by the fans. Now, I think the Predators had some good moments last night. Lloyd Cushenberry snapping a catfish to Will Levis, I thought was absolutely hilarious when it happened. I saw Levis standing up there on the band stage, and there was some dude next to him. Like, who the hell is that next to Levis? I'm sure it's some dude on the Titans, but I don't know who it is. It ended up being Lloyd Cushenberry. And so, I thought that kind of got the crowd fired up a little bit or whatever. But the atmosphere wasn't made last night because Will Levis kissed a catfish or Taylor Lewan chugged a beer or whatever. But the Preds Twitter felt night and day, in my opinion, different between the atmosphere from Game 3 to Game 4. And as somebody who sat in the building for both Game 3 and Game 4, I did not feel a difference. I felt like both nights the crowd was into it. The crowd was energized. The crowd was as anxious as I was. The crowd wanted to see the team win. I thought all those things were the case. And I think it's hard for a crowd to stay in it when you give up a goal on the first shot of the game Friday night and you don't score until 57 minutes in. But I don't think it had anything to do with the game ops crew, even if Sean Henry is coming on the show saying, yeah, there were some things we did, we could have done better. I did not feel like there was any difference between Friday and Sunday. Sorry. I thought it was overblown, and I just thought that it was Preds fans looking to bitch. That's what I thought it was. And I just, again, call a spade around here. I just thought it was ridiculous. And I stand by that. Dave says, Andrew Burnett did not end up getting the full-time job in Florida because he completely mismanaged the lines in the playoffs, and John Cooper ate his lunch in that playoff series a couple years ago. So I don't remember anything about that playoff series. I'll have to take your word for it. One texter says, the complaining from the fans about not playing Run This Town was absurd. Some fans are trying to recapture the magic of the 2017 run, and it's just not possible to recreate that. Agreed. The fans had a different mentality prior to 2017. The fans wanted the team to win, but I think they deep down inside never thought the team was going to win. Then the team won, and it was like, we expect this team to win. And it's just a different approach. It was a different atmosphere.
This series kind of feels like the Preds have almost reverted back to the first half of the season. And they're like finding ways to lose games. Whether it's the goalie's off a little bit one night, or special teams and power play is off one night, or they give up
12 seconds.
Some leads. Yeah, like the Dallas thing where they give up a couple of leads late another night. You know, in the second half of the season when they started to really pour it on, that kind of stuff went away. But the first half of the season, it was inconsistent. In every game, they played okay, but it was a little back and forth, and they were finding ways to lose. And this series kind of feels like the first half of the season all over again. It's almost like the break after the regular season, they haven't been able to, like, get back to it.
So I wonder if Barry Trotz came on the show, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting, came on the show like 3 weeks ago. You know, when the Predators were playing Winnipeg, when they were 1 point shy of a playoff spot, and I asked about the fans, and I was expecting the answer to be, oh, we have the best fans, and we know with our fans we can beat anybody, and we love our fans, and they're the best fans, and, you know, the ass-kissing of the fans that every coach and general manager, that everybody does. And Barry didn't say that. Barry talked about how great the fans are, but basically had a message for the fans. And again, I'm paraphrasing, saying, you know, hey, stay behind the team. Don't get on them. You know, don't. This team, they can feel the pressure. I've been behind the bench, and I know that when the fans turn on the team, I know how it affects the team. So let's get behind the team, and let's cheer on the team. And, you know, nobody's going to be trying harder to win than the team. And we love our fans, but fans, we need you behind us. And it was almost like Barry was saying, fans, please do not get mad at the players. Now, Barry Trotz is not stupid. We all know that. Barry Trotz, this is not his first rodeo. And so I keep thinking about Barry Trotz saying that. Or, again, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. And I keep thinking about that. And I'm like, was Barry Trotz doing that, begging the fans to stay behind the team no matter what, because maybe Barry Trotz feels like the team is soft? Like that the team is going to grip the sticks too tight? We all know there are certain dudes you have to motivate in order to get them to be successful. And then there are some people out there, especially in sports, that you have to say, hey, calm down, chill out. And maybe that's what this team is. And they grip the sticks too tight. And Barry knows it, which is why Barry went on that, you know, and Andrew Burnett, they went on that campaign of we've got nothing to lose. And then this team is out there playing like the Toronto Maple Leafs play, like they've got everything to lose. And so that's just my opinion on it. One texter says, Jared, do you think the crowd has changed over time after the Predators raised the ticket prices? The answer to that is no. I do not. Now, I don't know what the ticket prices for the playoffs were before, 17. I mean, I was a ticket holder then and I'm a ticket holder now, but I don't go year by year and look at it and say, oh, okay, it's this much, or oh, okay, it's that much, or whatever. But I don't think that it is changed so drastically. I thought about it when they raised the ticket prices for the 18 playoffs. They got crushed. And I said, look, it's not nationalpredators.gov or .org. They're not a nonprofit. It's nationalpredators.com. It's a business. But if you do this and you bring in a different crowd and then you lose the people that have been there from the jump, you're going to be the ones that end up suffering for that. Not the fans, not the bandwagoners that are, well, I like it now, let me buy, but the people that may get priced out. But I don't think that the Predators have priced at this point, given the fact that I feel like it's kind of gone back a little bit to what it was before 17, not all the way back, but a little bit. I don't feel like there's I don't feel like the people that are in the building are people that don't care. I feel like the people that are in the building are the people that love the team. I mean, I looked at the crowd last night, and I'm like, I didn't see an empty seat. And that crowd went crazy. And that crowd wanted that team to win. And that crowd all felt the same way when that puck hit that post. I think there's still diehard fans that are in that building. So I don't think that that's the issue. One texter, Stephanie, says, and I think this is the best way to end this segment today, says one of the glaring reasons this team is nowhere close to 17 is that they don't have Pekka Rinne, and Saros is not Rinne. I think deep down inside we thought this was Aaron Rodgers after Brett Favre, and it's not. Rinne was a different caliber of goaltender when he was on than Saros has been in the playoffs. Now, Saros, when he's on in the regular season, he's great, but he's never been on in the playoffs. And after 3 tries, I think it's pretty obvious that might just be what he is. All right, the Titans draft. Mel Kiper Jr. does not like your draft. But I got some good news about Mel's grade. We'll get to that coming up next. I promised we'd be giving something away, so let's do it now. Be caller 5 at 615-737-1025, and you will see Stevie Nicks at Bridgestone Arena on Tuesday, May 14th. Good luck on that. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Gabe Nashville studios. Mel Kiper Jr. has his grade for the Titans draft, and it is not pretty. Mel gives the Titans a C+, which for Mel Kiper is pretty terrible. I think there were like 2 teams that got C's. Everybody else either got a C+ or worse. Or better, excuse me. I believe Atlanta got a C and some other bozo, Denver maybe, got a C. And then everybody else was C+ or better, and most people were better. So for Mel Kiper Jr., a C+ is not good. Now let me start off by saying this. I think that most grades for draft classes are stupid anyways. Like, I think that we should be grading the 2020 draft right now, in which the Titans would have absolutely positively gotten an F for their 2020 draft. But I really think that grades for drafts, they really end up being more A. Sometimes there's some good drafts that are okay, but don't have superstars. That's kind of a B. And then there's just, Caleb Farley, Dylan Radins. F! But Mel gives them a C+. Mel writes at ESPN. Ian, should I do Mel's voice or should I just read it?
Maybe a little bit of both. Mix in a Mel word here or there.
Mel says, the Titans were a popular team in mock drafts for predictions on the first team to take an offensive tackle in the mock drafts. Mel says, but I said a few times I thought they could trade down from number 7 and still get one of the best tackles in the class. With Joe Alt gone to the Chargers at 5, though, it seemed like Tennessee picked at least a little high in selecting J.C. Latham. So he says it's a reach on Latham. Yes, the offense ranked 31st in sack rate per dropback last season and allowed 64 sacks, which was the second most in the history of the franchise. But as I wrote Thursday night, I have doubts about whether Latham can play left tackle, and the Titans have now taken a right tackle and a guard in the top 11 in back-to-back drafts. Is that the best use of high picks, Mel asks. I'm not so sure, though I do think Latham can be a physically imposing run blocker. In round 2, Mel writes, Tennessee reached for nose tackle Tavondre Sweat, who I thought was more of a third-rounder because of his inconsistent play and an arrest for driving while intoxicated earlier this month. Cedric Gray could be a steal in round 4. He may never be great in coverage, but he can blitz off the edge and be a menace between the tackles in the run game. James Williams is a 6'4 safety who will likely move to linebacker at the next level. All in all, Mel writes, if Latham makes an easy conversion to left tackle and immediately dominates, this class will look much better. As is, I don't love the value overall. That's what Mel Kiper wrote. So get some good news and bad news. Good news is this. Mel Kiper's opinion really doesn't matter. And Mel Kiper gave the 2017 Chiefs draft a C+. Ian, do you know who the first-round draft choice of the Chiefs in 2017 was?
Was it Mahomes? It
was Patrick Mahomes. They also got Kareem Hunt in that same draft. By the way, the other team that got a C+, because again, C+ is bad for Mel Kiper. The other team that got a C+ in that draft, the Rams. You know who they drafted? Cooper Kupp. So, again, let's use the context of Mel here. But there is no doubt that the Titans took some swings in the draft that most people thought might have been a little over the top. It does feel like the Titans reached for Latham, and they absolutely reached at 38 for Tavondre Sweat. Now, the Titans will tell you they don't care. That these are the players we wanted, and we got them, and so we need them, and that's who we're going with. And that's fine. But that's not really maximizing your assets in the NFL, or as the GM would call it,
the board is set up according to NFL standards. And so, in theory, now this would never happen, but in theory, you're saying if our board has 4 7-0s on it, then all the boards across the league will have 4 7-0s on them. Now, we know that won't be the case. But generally, your board is set up according to the league simply because, as we all know, if you are putting a middle linebacker, you're giving him a grade of 5.5, and then you start talking about it, you go, you know what, we really need a linebacker. Then all of a sudden he's a 5'9", and then, somebody else comes in, the linebacker coach says, you know what, I don't have any linebacker. Whoop, now all of a sudden he's a 6'5", and he keeps moving up the board, when in reality he's still 5'5". So in the first round, you go out and you draft a guy because you need him that is a third-round player in the first round. Well, that's the cardinal sin of drafting. You just can't do that.
Okay, he's telling you, you can't overdraft. And so while, again, everybody's rankings are different, everybody's board's different, he said the way that they would evaluate their board was not about whether or not they made good picks 3 years later. They evaluated their board based upon what the NFL viewed their players as. So where do these guys go? Are we in tune with the rest of the league? Or are we the ones who are off? And I don't look at one guy saying that, well, I have J.C. Latham as the 12th best player and they took him at 7. But the problem is that everybody had J.C. Latham. All of the draft gurus had J.C. Latham as the 12th, 13th, 14th best prospect. And you can't take the 14th best prospect with the 7th pick. And again, T'Vondre Sweat. Mel Kiper says round 3. Dane Brugler at The Athletic says round 4. Daniel Jeremiah says 114. They reached at 38. And again, that's the cardinal sin of drafting, according to the GM. So on one hand, who gives a rat's ass what Mel Kiper thinks? On the other hand, it does feel like the Titans reached in the draft, at least according to the consensus. I would love to ask somebody associated with another team, hey, where did you have T'Vondre Sweat on your board? Did you have him at 38? Or did you have him at 114? Or did you have him completely off your board? But, again, now's not the time to say whether or not they're geniuses or morons or whatever. That will come 3 or 4 years from now. And everybody will decide for them whether or not the Titans were smart and they reached on Latham or he was an absolute superstar at left tackle. They reached on Sweat, or Sweat has maturity issues or whatever, or they drafted the next Albert Haynesworth. We'll find that out down the road. But I do think there's some truth that when every draft guru is saying you reached, chances are you probably reached. And that is not a good sign. So I'm not going to sit here. I don't care about grades on drafts. B, I mean, who cares? F, who cares? But I do think, people were tweeting me on Saturday, we're killing it in the draft, Jared. I'm like, you could draft anybody, and the Titan fans be like, yeah. Titan fans hated the J.C. Latham pick when it was made, and now they've come around to it. They like it. To me, it was a reach. I think you could have traded down. Was Atlanta really going to take J.C. Latham? I think they had their heart set on Michael Penix. I don't think Atlanta was sitting there in the war room saying, damn it. They just took J.C. Latham, and now we can't do the stupidest thing and take Michael Penix. Come on now. 615-737-1025 to your phones on this. There is an excuse the Titans are making. To me, I have a hard time accepting T'Vondre Sweat at 38. I don't have a problem with the player. I do have a problem with the off-the-field stuff. But when everybody's telling me third round, fourth round grades, and you took them at 38, I got a problem with that. And the Titans had their excuse for why they didn't trade down. You tell me if you buy it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
made in the first 10, 12 picks of the second round. How much action were you getting? How much consideration did you give?
Tons of calls. We up until when we walked up here at 4 o'clock with JC, we had about 8, 9 calls, 8, 9 offers for the pick, and we were fielding the calls, listening. But one thing we talked about was, let's see how this board shakes out. We knew there was going to be an early run on receivers, and we knew that with the defensive tackles that were right there, it was only a matter of time of when that run happened, and you knew that there was going to be a run on the corners right there. And so the receiver run happened early, like we thought, and then as soon as I think it was Washington traded into the pick and took Johnny Newton, we knew that run was going to happen, and it's just the way the board took shape.
It's probably important to note too that it's just because there's phone calls doesn't mean that they're good deals. Doesn't mean that they fit for us. Some of these calls and some of these trades, you're dropping down a significant level of player when you start dropping deep into the second, and sometimes the reciprocal value isn't there because everyone thinks that they can try to pull one over and get a deal, and that's not how it works. So there's a cost of doing business, and when you want to come up that high, there's things that are required, and some teams meet it, some teams don't. But I think there was just a world of player that we weren't quite ready to dip out of.
Ah, yes. The rookie head coach talking about, I know when they're trying to pull one over on us, and the GM who drafted a guard with the 11th overall pick telling us, hey, man, we knew how this draft was going to go. Even though there were all these trades, there's no way we could have traded out of 38 for T'Vondre Sweat. Bullcrap. I am not buying that. Now, if the Titans sat there and said, Jared, we think this player is so freaking good that we didn't want to chance it, I'd say, but you didn't think you could have gotten something out of this? You didn't think that you could have moved back a little bit? Is he really that good? If he's that good, why does nobody else think that? Because Dane Brugler had a 4th-round grade on T'Vondre Sweat. Daniel Jeremiah had T'Vondre Sweat ranked at 114th. And Mel Kiper had a 3rd-round grade, and I heard Caroline talking about this today. Apparently, the Pro Football Focus draft the board thinks the least of T'Vondre Sweat. So, when we talk about consensus top 10, consensus first rounder, consensus All-American, well, in the case of T'Vondre Sweat, it feels like he was a consensus not 2nd-round pick. Now, that doesn't mean that I hate the pick, because I actually see the value of the player on the Titans. The problem is, were the Titans one of 32 that thought this guy was a 2nd-rounder? Because it feels like that's the case. Now, the Titans will tell you, because, again, Rand Carthon was like, well, when Johnny Newton went off the board, that started the run on the DTs, which sounds great, but Johnny Newton is not the same kind of prospect as T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat is not in Johnny Newton's zip code. Johnny Newton was a 1st-round caliber player. T'Vondre Sweat was not. So, again, you couldn't have traded down and managed the asset better for a guy who 4th-round grade from one guy, 114 from another guy, which is also the 4th round, 3rd round for Mel Kiper. Even in Daniel Jeremiah's first big board, so around the Super Bowl, pre-DWI, pre the concerns about the weight coming out on T'Vondre Sweat, he had him ranked at 48. You can't take the 48th best player with the 38th pick. And here are the trades that went down after the Titans picked at 38. At 39, Carolina traded to Los Angeles for 52, a 2nd-rounder, 155, which I believe is a 6th-rounder, and a 2nd-rounder next year. Again, using the assumption that the draft gurus are at least in the ballpark, you probably could have gotten T'Vondre Sweat at 50, 52, 53, 45. You probably could have gotten T'Vondre Sweat at 52 with the Rams and picked up a second in next year's draft. You don't think that would have been valuable? At 40, Washington traded with Philadelphia. 40, 78. Now, you don't have a third rounder, which makes this kind of hard. 70, 38, and 152 for 50, 53, and 161. So you would have had to fudge it some way, somehow. You probably would have had to give up 106, and you probably would not have gotten 161 in return. You know, there'd have to be some kind of fudging there a little bit. But they got 2 second-round picks. And again, I mean, Ian, without knowing any other team's board, but just going off of Mel and all the draft gurus and everybody else, do you think that T'Vondre Sweat would have been available at 50?
That's 12 picks. Back 12, huh? I mean, it sounds like it. But,
I mean, again, if people are saying that he's 114th on the board.
I mean, that's pretty far. Yeah, I mean, 114 to 38, that's a lot. That's a big difference there.
And so if you pick up 2 second-round picks here, you pick up 50 and 53, I mean, now you can take him at 50, and then you get another second-round player at 53. And again,
maybe they knew someone was hot on Sweat in that range.
I haven't heard that narrative yet. And then Green Bay traded 41 for 45. Now they picked up 168 and 190. You know, so who cares about 168 and 190? But again, when it comes to this asset management, I mean, I highly doubt that Chad Brinker's Curing Cancer AI business school model that he thinks is going to save them $1 million here or $2 million there, that he's such a genius that he got a promotion for not doing anything last year up to president. I cannot imagine that Chad Brinker's cancer curing model says that you should take the 114th best player at 38. And especially when it was clear that everybody wanted to trade. Everybody wanted to trade on Friday night. So, again, I don't have a problem with the player. I'm concerned about the red flags, and I'm not going to dismiss him. And if he shows up and pulls the Traylon Burks and is out of the first day of rookie minicamp because he's too fat, then we're going to have a huge problem on this program. But, again, you can't tell me that there weren't trades to be made. You said the phone was ringing off the hook. You can't tell me that teams weren't willing to make reasonable trades because these trades are legit. 52, 155, and a second for 39?
You think the Rams right behind at 39, they took this Fisk kid?
Fisk was a consensus second rounder.
Uh-huh. Maybe.
Again, T'Vondre Sweat.
Who's also defensive lineman, so same kind of position.
Sweat was a consensus non-second rounder. That is... And I'm not saying if you love the player, take him. Especially if you don't have a third-round pick, I get it. But you got to know where he's going to go in the league because, again, you cannot take a guy just because you like him. You cannot take a guy and overdraft him because that's bad asset management. As the GM would say, that is the cardinal sin of drafting. And so I can't believe, considering that 39 went off the board and 40 went off the board and 41 went off the board, I cannot imagine that the Tennessee Titans were not getting real offers for that pick. Again, these were real offers that went down for those picks, that they wouldn't get offers from the same teams looking for the same player they wanted, that they weren't getting those same kind of calls.
Sounds like we were hearing more about Chris Jenkins, the defensive lineman from Michigan, and he went 49.
It sounds to me like the Titans decided that they were going to take T'Vondre Sweat no matter what. And as I've said with Rand Carthon, when he decides he's going to do something, he does it. And oftentimes, there's a detail in there that is a pretty big one that they just conveniently overlook, like L'Jarius Sneed's knees. Minnesota wanted to do it, offered a better deal. Then they heard about the knees, and they were like, no. And so I don't necessarily have a problem with the player, though I am concerned about the red flags. But you cannot tell me that there was not a trade that they could have made. And that's not even that. I think they could have made a trade for Latham. I think they could have traded back for Latham. If they had traded back with Minnesota to 11, were the Jets going to take him at 10? The Bears were going to take Roma Dunze no matter what. It feels like the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix no matter what. You trade back to 11. So now the Jets, who's to say they would have picked him over Fashanu? So that stuff is the concerning part, is that the Titans are just out here winging it with no value to the board. And that's a problem. 615-737-1025. We're to your phone, 615-737-1025 on the program here on Stillman and Company. Plus, what Mel Kiper said, he did a breakdown of the Titans class. We'll do that next as well here on Stillman and Company. Let's talk about Twice Daily. I absolutely love Twice Daily. They've got all your cravings, and you can save on every visit. Stop in and get rewarded. All you need to do is join the Twice Daily Rewards program to unlock special discounts, savings, enter their sweepstakes, and so much more. Try out the new wraps at Twice Daily, like the Italian, the ham and cheddar, the turkey and Swiss, and the Nashville hot chicken. They're made to order with your favorite toppings, so when you download the Twice Daily app, you can order ahead. Or at Twice Daily, it's snack time all the time, and they've got favorites like chicken fingers, tater rounds, new pretzels, and more. Twice Daily. What are you craving?
You look at T'Vondre Sweat. I like the kid. I'd liked him a lot better, more than anybody did. We had debated that. I thought he was a guy who was productive. I thought he was more disruptive than anybody gave him credit for. Byron Murphy II didn't outproduce him by much in terms of even sack production. He had 5. Sweat had with 2.5. Sweat was getting the job done. Why couldn't you run against Texas? It was because of that wall that was T'Vondre Sweat. He is huge. I understand the draft process didn't treat him tremendously well. But you go back to the tape, people say, well, he's built for 1980. He's another one of those guys. I talk about Tommy Eichenberg, built for the 80s. You know, we don't need to stay-at-home type defensive tackles anymore. Last time I checked, they still do run the football. And T'Vondre Sweat did give you some ability to get into the backfield. So when you look at it and you size it all up, I thought at the end of the day he'd be a third-round pick like Gilbert Brown, who was my comp to him when he came out of Kansas a while ago, right? Had a good career. T'Vondre Sweat was a little early for everybody, I think. For me, though, I like the player. I like what he can become if he stays focused on the attention to detail, stays focused on the job at hand. I think he can be a guy who can help this football team. J.C. Latham, can he be a left tackle? We don't know that. He believes he can. Alabama never moved him. I love him as a right tackle. Can he be a left tackle? Of their late-round picks, Jarvis Brownlee's okay. Down the field, he's got to locate the ball. Yep. That's what bothered me a little bit with him. I said it when he was drafted. So some of these guys, they're okay. James Williams is a tweener. What is he? Is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? That's why I gave them a grade that I did, not as high as some of the other teams in the league this year, and the division even. But I think Sweat, to me, is really a key guy because I think overall field, their draft brought in some guys that can help them. And Latham, can he be a left tackle? I wasn't loving a lot of it. I thought it was a decent draft, not a really good one, but we'll see how it plays out.
There you go, Mel Kiper crapping on your draft, just saying, look, you reached. You reached third-round grade on Sweat. Somebody texts in and says, it's not about where other people had him on the draft board. If Rand and the Titans had him high enough to make the pick at 38, then that's all that matters. It's not really how the NFL works. Again, the GM, we already played the cut this hour, says your board needs to match the league. And you cannot say, well, we need this guy and we like him, so let's take him in the first round when he's not a first-round player. And in the case of T'Vondre Sweat, either everybody is wrong. Mel, Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, all the gurus. Every single one of them. Either every single guru is wrong, and all the NFL teams had a second-round grade on T'Vondre Sweat in spite of the weight issues, the DWI, the maturity question marks, everything else. Or you overdrafted him. Now, which one do you think is more likely? Got it. So, again, I have no problem with loving the player and getting the player on your team. I have a problem with taking the 114th best player at 38. That's what I have a problem with. Let's go to phones as promised. Travis is up next here on our program. Has been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Travis.
Hey, I appreciate what you're saying about the so-called experts having them listed at a certain number. And I agree with that to some extent. But I think that the Titans had a direction that they wanted to go before this draft, and that's just adding beef. We lost Autry. We needed a big left tackle that could be beside Peter Skoronski. So I feel like they had a direction, and they took that direction regardless of the experts, so-called, or where they have them placed on the board. And I think it's going to be a good pickup.
Here's the question, though, about the desire for beef. Travis, let me ask you a question. Here's the problem, though, right? If there are better players ahead of those players, what do you want? Do you want the better players, or do you want the players that you want because you want the beef?
Well, I mean, you put on the tape of Sweat, he's a good player. And he could be really good, especially if he drops some weight.
Okay, that's a pretty big if.
I mean, and Latham played a left tackle in high school.
Oh, high school!
I mean, he has the footwork. Jared is what I'm saying. He has the footwork.
I mean, he didn't have the footwork for Nick Saban.
They had Evans over there. I mean, so you got to give him a chance.
He went to the NFL. He's been in the NFL for 2 years. They had a true freshman over there. The year before that, they had a transfer from Vanderbilt over there. Vandy!
Either way,
I know. Thank you, Travis. See, that's the problem. You guys eat up all the bull crap, and then you don't listen to.
I do wonder if it makes us feel better. If he can go from left to right, could he go from right to left?
Well, that's high school.
Well, he went from high school to college, and he was good in college.
In college, he played right guard, and then he moved out to right tackle.
So
Nick Saban is telling you he's not a left tackle.
Well, if he went from left tackle in high school and he was adjusted to the right side fine in college, maybe there's some promise there.
Do you think the Titans broke down the high school tape?
Probably not.
Right, because it doesn't matter. In high school he played. In high school, he could have played any position. It wouldn't matter. You could have put him at running back, and it wouldn't have mattered because they wouldn't have been able to tackle him. I mean, this is the NFL. Like, this is the top 10 of the draft in the NFL, and you're like, well, in high school he played. Right. And in college, Nick Saban was like, no, you stay over there. When they had, again, a transfer from Vandy and a true freshman. So make of it what you will. And then again, with the Sweat thing, it's like, we needed the beef. Right. Could you have gotten the beef at 45 with New Orleans, who traded up to 41? Could you have gotten the beef with Philadelphia at 50, who traded up to 40? Or with the Rams at 52, who traded up to 39? My guess is yes. And let's say you made that deal. Now, you would have had to have gotten creative. Let's say you had traded 38 and 106. Again, the Washington trade was 40, 78 and 152 for 50 and 53. So 2 second rounders. Let's say, and 161. Let's say instead of that, you trade 40 plus 106, forget about 152 and forget about 161, for 50 and 53. You don't think you could have gotten T'Vondre Sweat there? And if you didn't get T'Vondre Sweat there, which, again, I think you would have, but if you didn't get T'Vondre Sweat there, guess what? There probably would have been 2 good players that you could have picked from. So this idea of like, oh, no, Jared. The Titans, the Titans always know better, just like they knew better last year with the freaking guard who stunk as a rookie. Vincent is up next here on the program. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, so my professional
Vincent, talking to the phone, please.
My professional teams are terrible. They are terrible. How possibly can the Titans get it so wrong consistently for so long? And if anybody does just a halfway keeps up with it fan, look at your last 7 first round. I'm talking about first round picks. First rounders are terrible.
In fairness, most of those have nothing to do with anybody who's making decisions now other than the owner.
Okay, yes, okay, because this was Rand's first draft. Please, I am ready to punt and start over already. I'm already ready. Let's go. Who's the next GM?
So here's the thing, Vincent. I don't disagree with your sentiment at all, actually, and I appreciate your call. I don't disagree with that sentiment. I mean, a lot of people got really, really mad when I said with the Titans that at the end of the year with this Vrabel and Rand Carthon commission and whatever you want to call it, whatever. I mean, I thought it was bullcrap from the jump. You guys all believed into it, just like you believe that, well, J.C. Latham played left tackle in high school, so he can play in the NFL. I didn't buy that from the beginning, and I still don't necessarily buy what they've got going on now. But I said I would have cleaned house. And people were like, that's not fair! And I'm like, right, but the NFL's not fair. But I would have cleaned house because it's really time for a reset. I'm not saying reset with the roster. I'm saying it's time for a reset. It's time for all of the bad, everything from the past, just go away. And nobody is committed to anything that is on this team as of right now. And we start from scratch with new eyes and a new voice and kind of a singular direction. But nope, the Titans had a different plan. And so I just agree that I think it's time to go in a new direction as far as, all of this, how they're building the team. And what I think ends up happening is I think the team ends up making these draft choices, and it's an overcorrection all the time. It's an overcorrection. In this case, the line was so bad last year that they had to take a lineman, so whoever the failed head coach who's an offensive line guru, whoever he says pick, will pick. And that's what they did. And I just think that's bad business. More of your phones. 615-737-1025 on our program. 615-737-1025. Let's talk. And at some point, I should have my entire draft breakdown. Let's talk FanDuel Sportsbook, my official sportsbook app. Dingers, blasts, moonshots, whatever you call it, everybody loves the long ball, the home run. And with FanDuel's Dinger Tuesdays, you can love them even more. That's right, Dinger Tuesdays are back for another season on America's #1 sportsbook and my official sportsbook app, FanDuel. Just bet on a player to hit a homer, and FanDuel will give you $5 in bonus bets for every home run hit during that game. As if you needed another reason to love the long ball. Go to FanDuel.com/JGM to get in on all the Dinger Tuesday action. That's FanDuel.com/JGM. And make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and my official sportsbook app. 21 and over and present Tennessee bonus issues, non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Max bonus $25 per game. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
With the 38th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Trayvondre Sweat from the University of Texas, nose guard.
Yeah, this is a mammoth human being. You see the weight there, 366 pounds. This is someone who can really clog the run lanes with his big frame. There are a lot of attention on him this year. When scouts got in and studied him, they liked Byron Murphy better. You saw Byron Murphy go off the board. But Sweat is just a massive human being who can push the pocket with that power, put that weight and that size to work, and just walk centers and guards back. I don't believe he's a big-time pass rusher. You see flashes of it, like this one against TCU. This was a very polarizing player.
There you go. That was Daniel Jeremiah being like, oh, he's a good run stuffer. A good run stuffer at 38. Now, again, I don't hate the player. I don't hate the pick. I see the marriage between him and Simmons. But there's a lot of red flags. And, again, he was consensus not worth 38. One texter texts into the text line and says, again, a lot of people get mad saying, well, all that matters was the Titans wanted the guy, and if the Titans wanted the guy, then that's all that matters. And one texter says, look at The Athletic. The Athletic gave the Titans the 26th best draft class. The texter asks, how do you have the 26th best draft class if you have the 7th overall pick in a draft? Between that and Mel Kiper Jr. not liking the Titans draft and others, the Titans are consistently getting knocked for reaching on both Latham and on Tavondre Sweat. And it made me think in my head, like, that is kind of crazy that you have the 7th pick and ended up with the 26th ranked draft. Now, again, who knows? You know, Mel Kiper Jr. gave a C+, the same grade he gave you to the draft that the Chiefs had that had Patrick Mahomes in it. But what they're telling you is they're telling you reached. And what you're saying is one of two things. Either you're saying, our people know and you don't, or you're saying you don't care that they reached. And I guarantee you, if I talked to you last week and said, hey, we're going to take the 114th best player at 38, you'd have said, hell no. But because you picked him, now you convince yourself that no, this is right. This is the way it's supposed to go. One texter says, let's not fool ourselves. It was a disappointing, mediocre, i.e. typical Titans draft. I don't know that. The one I don't like is the Latham pick. Because there's too many question marks at 7 overall that I don't like. But I can't say that it's not that bad. One texter says, Jared, if you don't like the first 2 picks, just curious, who do you think the Titans should have taken? I think the Titans at 7 should have taken Brock Bowers. And again, I talked to a former NFL head coach who told me when the Titans were on the clock, sent me a text saying, take the tight end out of Georgia. He's going to the Hall of Fame. And I talked to somebody that's around the Raiders who ended up taking Bowers. And the Raiders, Bowers was a prospect for the Raiders that they knew they weren't going to be able to pick. That they thought so much of Bowers that they were like, oh, yeah, I mean, we'd love to take him, but he's not going to be there. And so I would have gone Bowers at 7. Because the way that, again, Mark Dominic and the way that, again, that former NFL coach and other people have talked about Bowers, I mean, there's a lot of love for what that kid's capable of. Bill Polian was all in on Bowers. And I think, again, a tight end's great for a young quarterback. And I believe that Bowers was the best player available at 7. So I would have taken him. Then would that have affected my pick at 38? I don't have a problem with the pick of Tavondre Sweat. But again, if he's on these boards around the league, and I'm not saying that he's for sure on those boards around the league because of where all the gurus had him, but I mean, a lot of these gurus are talking to the teams. Like, keep that in mind. But regardless, I mean, you could have had him probably at 52. And to move up to 39, you were at 38. The Rams traded 52, 155, and next year second. And I would have loved that trade. And then I could have made my pick. And maybe Tavondre Sweat, most likely Tavondre Sweat still would have been there. So I don't have a problem with the second player. I really don't have a problem with the first player. Now, I'd put the first player at right tackle for this season, and then I'd move him to left tackle. But they're not going to do that. Texter says, Jared, it's time to realize the Titans are one of the crap teams in the league, and it's not going to change anytime soon. It is time to jump the shark. I had that realization on the Thursday after the Titans fired John Robinson on Tuesday, when I did a lot of digging, thinking that there must have been a PR thing or a power struggle or an FU to Amy or something like that got him fired. When I found out it was none of it and the Titans just decided to fire the general manager in the middle of the season when they were in first place, I realized my team's probably not the brightest. So I've already had that moment. But I'll love the Titans no matter what, because I love the Titans, and I will continue to love the Titans. That's it for us. We're back tomorrow at 2. The Commodore Hour is coming up next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 through the game.